come on with the short shot. Sure to make the body drop, dropping no copio or call us a co-op. Terror rage, quenching the thirst of the power dog. That five-sided pentagon, that rocket sword on the face of the earth gets bigger. The triggers call empty apart. Rally around the family with a pocket full of shells. Rally around the family with a pocket full of shells. Rally around the family with a pocket full of shells. Rally around the family with a pocket full of shells. What if it's not food, not hope, not shoot, not need, just be the war cannibal animal. Walk the corner to the rubble. That used to be a library, line up to the mine cemetery now. What we don't know keeps the contract alive and moving. They don't gotta burn the book, they just remove them. While on warehouses, so they take us down. Rally around the family, pockets full of shells. Rally around the family with a pocket full of shells. They rally around the family with a pocket full of shells. They rally around the family with a pocket full of shells. They rally around the family with a pocket full of shells.
All right. All right, welcome to Patriot Lament. My name is Joshua Bennett. We'll be on the air here talking about multiple things for the next 3 hours. In particular, the first hour is going to be about what this song is about. War. In the studio, of course, got Mr. Mike Anderson. Good morning, Mike.
Morning.
And online, I believe, Dave, are you there?
I am here, yeah. You got me
I know here, no David. Well, let's try it, Josh. We have another Josh on there. You on there, Josh?
I'm here.
Okay, cool. Dave, we got no audio from you, bro.
It's only on the stream.
No.
Okay.
I can't.
So we're going to wait a second. Nah, we'll get it figured out. Okay. So, what we have here. A little bit later, we're going to talk about the thing going on in Virginia. Hello, Dave.
Hey, we got some work on the StreamYard audio to do. All the audio is going through StreamYard. It's just not getting into the board.
Got it. We'll figure it out.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine. All right, but what we want to... Oh, the other Josh, we'll call him Josh 1, or just call him number 1. Old friend of all of ours, hasn't been on the show for quite a while. I think you've been with us before, haven't you, Josh, in the past? Long time ago.
I believe called in before, sure.
Yeah. Yep. Right on. All right, remember, you can join us at 907-458-8255. Might be a while before we take phone calls. Check us out on our Instagram page. Remember, if you're in Fairbanks area, you can tune in on 97.5 FM, where the rock and roll sounds much better than 660 AM. Get on a 660 KFAR tune-in app if you want, or radio app on your phone. I prefer the tune app. Look for 660 KFAR or Patriot Lament. And we are live streaming on YouTube, where you can jump in there and comment nice things or not so nice things. We don't care. All right, guys. I'd say there's two interesting things going on with America. And the most recent, of course, is the Donald, the Great Orange, in his wonderful, brilliant mind, decided that pulling out of the Middle East means assassinating people and sending more people into the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Again, of course, we all know that this all revolves around 5D chess. They used to say 3D, 4D. This is 5D. This guy is like deep thinker.
You up to 60 yet?
Well, probably by next week.
Oh, okay.
By next week, it'll be 60 chess. But deep thinker, obviously. So if you don't know what happened, wow. Actually, if you don't know what happened, it's not a bad thing. That means you're not watching the news. Good for you. But the Donald busted out and had the military assassinate the head of the Iranian Quds Army, Revolutionary Guard. He's wasn't a good guy by any stretch, but neither is Donald Trump. They're both murderers, so, tit for tat. The guy came in, obviously, well, no, I can't say that. So last week there was some getting-ons, and the American military killed a few people, so the Iraqi people were upset about that, again. Attacked the embassy, had a little rioting going on, all that good stuff. And, how do you say the guy's name? Salamander or something like that?
Suleimani, I think.
Okay, good enough. He comes into Baghdad airport, flies in via the Baghdad International Airport there to supposedly come to some funerals that they're going to have for some of the people that got killed. And whilst transitioning from the airport to wherever he was heading, his little car, the convoy he was in got hit by a drone. Mm-hmm. He was obliterated. What's interesting is also a Iraqi general was obliterated. He was in charge of the Iraqi militias that are under the spouses of the Iraqi military. He was killed also.
Just going to say, you don't hear much about the Iraqi guy. You hear about the Iranian guy.
Yeah. The Iraq does have a government, duly elected, whatever that means. And they're a little bit ticked off right at the moment because they say that is interfering with their sovereignty. Plus, you killed one of our guys, too. And who are you to tell us who our friends can be? Well, America, that's who we are. And heavy backlash. Of course, everyone that you would assume is against what Trump did. Everyone that you would assume that would be for it is for it. The Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, today we take out a very terrible terrorist, and we applaud the Donald Trump for doing such things against the terrorists. And the Democrats, of course, who never met a war they didn't like as long as their president started it, are condemning it. Iran is condemning it because this guy was a big deal. Was head of pretty important guy for the last 20 years. And I just, on Target Liberty this morning, saw the headline. Top story is Iran raises flag that signals severe battle to come. Mm-hmm. The first time in history, red flag unfurled over the holy dome of Jamkaran Mosque, Qom, Iran. The red flag is a symbol of severe battle to come. So that's in Iran right now. Iran has guaranteed retaliation of some sort. So we'll see what happens there. Of course, the United States, all the neocons are, some had to be put into intensive care because they were so giddy they couldn't breathe, losing their mind. Because, of course, they love war. They love killing. They love murder. They love everything that's wrong. Anything that's evil, sign them up. And I love how, the Donald says that we had to kill this man because he was going to start some attacks. They had some info, and we all know how you can rely on American intelligence to give you whatever you need to give you to kill whoever you need to kill. imminent attacks, they said, on American lives. This guy was behind it, they said. And even though he was willy-nilly traveling around Iraq, this isn't the first time he's been in there. So they decided to kill him. And of course, they also said that they did this to lessen the chance of going to war with Iran. And if the guy that they assassinated would be about the same as if they took out Pompeo or a couple head dudes at the Pentagon, if Iran took them out. And if you think about it in that term, would you think it likely if Iran took out a couple of Pentagon officials and they said, well, we did this to make the chance of war less likely, would you automatically go, oh, way to go? That's really smart. Yeah. Because Iran could say, let's just say they took out a couple of Pentagon guys, the head chief of staff or something, and said, well, we had very good intelligence that he was going to kill some Iranians. So we decided to take him out to prevent war with America.
Well, except there is proof that the members of the Pentagon have plans to kill some Iranians.
No, of course. Of course there is. I'm just saying, flip the script. Of course. But Americans would not be saying, well, good job. You've made it less likely that we're going to war. It would be bomb Iran. And the Baptist church down the road here would have it blaring all over their sign, which they might this morning. They haven't gone by there yet.
Yeah, well, check
I'm
that out.
sure they're preaching the gospel of hate down there every day.
Yeah.
So I set the table, set it up. You guys comment. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was going to, of course, the story I told it has no details, as to why they killed the guy, no proof whatsoever. But the conflict in the region has been based on oil and gas pipelines for years. And if you go, in this incident, they blamed it on a protest at an American embassy in Iraq, which was caused by a strike by the U.S. In northern Iraq about a week ago. And that was supposedly in retaliation for a dead contractor who got killed by a rocket that was supposedly launched by Iranian-backed militia in Iraq before that. So you see this tit for tat nonsense. But there was never any proof offered that the Iranian militia, the Iranian-backed militia, launched this attack, and that area. That killed the contractor, and that area that they then struck that the U.S. then struck with the bombing about a week ago, I think it was, is in Al-Qaim. It's a border crossing and between Iraq and Syria, and it's the same place where there was a proposed gas pipeline and a proposed oil pipeline that was going to run from Iraq into Syria. The gas line was going to run from Iran up to the north, over to the west, cross Iraq into Syria, and then run into Europe. And it was called the Friendship Pipeline by Iran, Iraq, and Syria. And it hasn't, to my knowledge, it hasn't been constructed yet, but they still want to do it. And the oil line was going to run from Iraq into Syria out to their ports. And it was I think it was also backed by Iran. But of course, the powers that be, and that would be includes Israel. Israel's key to this too. They cannot tolerate Sunnis and Shiites having any kind of an alliance, and this alliance, this pipeline alliance, was going to create cooperation between the two groups. And that's considered by Israel to be a big no-no. They consider that a big threat. Anyone to be friends over there, that's a big threat to them. And so Israel has been using U.S. bases to launch attacks against Iranian-backed militias in Iraq.
Right.
But those Iranian-backed militias are, that one that was struck last week was officially made part of the Iraqi Defense Forces recently.
Right. They're the ones that...
These are Iraqis that the Americans killed.
They're the ones that actually were fighting ISIS.
They were, and that border crossing is in the Deir Zor, I can't pronounce it right, area. It was freed from ISIS about it was October 2017, a couple years ago. And that's the same place where that's the same region where the U.S. had set up the Al Tanf air base that they were operating out of in Syria. It was set up illegally, according to international law, without permission of Syria. And they were probably that was probably one of the places that they were supplying ISIS with the weapons when they were doing that. But Iran and Russia were able to kick ISIS out. Then, of course, the U.S. goes and takes credit for it, right? And then, but now that ISIS is out, there was no one there to prohibit the cooperation between Iran and Iraq to construct these pipelines.
Great. Well,
and that's what this is about. That's why the Soleimani was killed. He was in Iraq. Here he is, the Iranian leader who leads the Iranian military, who's cooperating with the Iraqis to try to get these pipelines built. That's why they killed him. They didn't kill him because he's going to attack Americans. They killed him to stop markets.
Well, their goal of the first thing I see is a backlash, unintended consequences, that the Sunnis and the Shias in the Iraqi government are united together now, and they want Americans out. They're having an emergency vote on Sunday, and they're going to pass a resolution telling the United States to get out of Iraq.
Yeah.
Will Iraq do it? Heck no. Heck no. Tech no.
Right.
Josh,
you don't think Iraq will actually do it?
No, Iraq will tell them to, but will America willingly leave? No.
Yeah,
go ahead. I think that will totally destroy. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. I can't fathom the U.S. leaving on Monday if that resolution goes through. I can't see it not going through. But also, I don't know if you saw Trump's speech right after the strike. It was exactly the opposite of what John Bolton tweeted out immediately after the strike, which was, "This is the best thing ever. I'm sad I couldn't be there." You know what I mean? He's been fired recently. Trump's whole speech is basically that we're not going to go in, it's not going to be permanent, it's to stop a war, blah, blah, blah. It was basically the exact opposite tone of Rumsfeld, Bolton, and that crowd. So it'll be super weird to see what happens on Monday, because, if we're really told to get out, it totally counters the entire narrative that, Pompeo and Trump and everyone have laid out since the strike, which I guess is only 2 days ago.
But can we go off what they say, Josh, versus what they do? I mean, 'cause I did see that, but I also see that he's sending 6,000 or 7,000 more soldiers over in an expeditionary force, and they already flew in 750 Marines after the embassy. And you can see that, whatever. Yeah. They're going to protect their base, but I want to do a little history thing, and you guys do it because this is more than just a pipeline. I mean, the United States beef with Iran goes back, and Iran's beef with the United States really goes way back. 1953, when the United States government installed the Shah of Iran, and then it a brutal dictator. And it was all to get their oil. The Brits had a big hand in that too. And then in 1979, the Iranian Revolution and the hostage taking and all that good stuff right there. And I think that there are still American generals, whatever, Americans in power that are still ticked off about that today. And they're ticked off they haven't been able to have a good old-fashioned war with Iran. I mean, remember, the United States backed Iraq, backed Saddam Hussein to attack Iran, start that 8-year war that killed millions of people. And we also gave Iran weapons. But that's where all the, this scenario with Iran's huge, because where did Saddam Hussein get his WMDs, weapons of mass destruction?
Come from the CIA.
From America, from the United States, gave him the chemical weapons to use on Iran.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, it was the CIA satellites that provided the coordinates that Saddam used to gas the Kurds.
Yep.
Using those weapons provided by the U.S. government.
I think there's a ton of historical beef here, which makes all Middle East conversation so difficult. But I think you were right with besides the historical stuff. The pipeline is a big issue. I think on the big oil is always an issue, but with the pipeline specifically, I think part of the issue too is that I read a really good theory online about this, where Europe gets all of its oil and gas from Russia, who I can't quite understand why Europe is so threatened by Russia anymore. I've heard it described as basically the same economy as Mexico with nukes, which it's still threatening, but it's not going to take over Europe. But they basically want energy independence from Russia. And this whole Middle East strategy is to kind of clear the board and get a pipeline from there to Europe, is what I read. And Iran, if you look at the map, Iran is right in the way of all of that. And it's really hard to trust the narrative, and especially for those of us who this isn't our first or even second rodeo, or third or fourth rodeo now, I think, with the Middle East stuff. But especially seeing the camps divide, I kind of like that I saw a little bit of anti-war sentiment on the right for the first time ever, but it vanished last night. I was on Twitter watching the camps divide, and the left suddenly remember that they have some vestigial anti-war notions they forgot about for 8 years. Well, Libya got glassed, and then the right started praising, just copy and pasting John Bolton tweets, which made me want to puke. So it's been interesting watching stuff regress, if you will.
Yeah. Well, the Donald, he's kind of in a spot, right? So he Corey just asked about the impeachment process, timing wise. The last time we had a president impeached was good old Bill.
Yeah.
And remember when he sent a few missiles lobbed into Sudan, I think it was Sudan, to blow up a Tylenol factory. And during the impeachment process going on then, and we have this happening right when the House has impeached Trump. But I think the Donald's kind of in a more sticky place than just that, because he's got to know, as arrogant as he is, there's got to be something in there that knows part of the reason he was elected last time is because he was the anti-war guy. Everyone knew Hillary was going to be in World War III day 2 of her presidency.
Yeah.
Trump was the anti-war candidate. He's the one that said, Afghanistan, what a joke. We need to get out of there. He was the one that was tweeting, watch this, Barack Obama's going to start a war with Iran. Sorry. Barack Obama's going to start a war with Iran so he gets reelected. Rah, rah, rah. That's wrong. I would pull us out of this. I would pull us out of that. I wouldn't go into Syria. So he's got to know that. And yet, so now he's putting steps forward to start World War III, literally, and then saying, well, I did this in the motion of peace, which is the same thing George W. did. I remember when he said, well, we had to start a war.
Well, I was listening to I heard his speech, or this part of his speech last night, announcing the death of Soleimani, and it caught me a little off guard. You know how when he gives a speech, he's normally very confident and arrogant. Yeah, he didn't seem that way so much last night. His voice was quivering, and he was more monotone than usual. And it made me think he's been threatened with conviction in the Senate or something else to go along with this, or he's concerned about what the outcomes would be because he personally doesn't want to have to deal with an Iranian war in the middle of all this. So yeah, I was thinking that impeachment thing too has he been threatened? Because he just didn't sound as confident in his tone of voice as he normally does.
That's interesting. So you mean like the Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, who are going to lead the Senate hearing on impeachment, might have said, "Look, you want to get impeached or not?"
That was my line of thinking. I don't know. Did you hear that, Josh? I don't know. Maybe I didn't. No,
I kind of get what you're saying. I mean, he does have two modes. He's got his like campaign mode where he just riffs for 4 hours, and then he's got his reading a speech mode, which he's not very good at. And it did feel, at least like the second, but maybe like kind of a modified kind of stolen version. It did feel like he wasn't bragging. He wasn't bragging like when they got that, who was the other guy? The other terrorist they got with the dog a while back.
Oh.
He was straight up bragging like.
Al-Baghdadi?
Yeah, Al-Baghdadi. Like,
he got killed for the 6th time. Yeah.
Yeah, they were straight up bragging about getting him, like Trump was. And then in this most recent thing, it was way more stolen. You're right. And I can see him having to do a deal with Lindsey Graham, especially, who is chair of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, right?
Yep.
I think he is.
Yep.
I thought he was going to hand it over to Grassley at some point, but I don't know if he did. But I think it's worth pointing out that it is weird because he's giving us mixed signals, because he has pulled back on the war machine at personal cost quite a bit. Like, he's gotten a lot of flack from Washington many times, from Democrats even. Like, they see it as a weakness thing. You can go back and find articles where the left media is criticizing him for being weak on foreign policy, for not doing enough bombing and stuff. Same thing like with the Syria stuff.
Right.
So it's weird to see him pivot this way. So there's got to be stuff going on. And to be totally frank, we've talked about the Middle East for half an hour without mentioning the House of Saud. And like, I don't understand anything that's going on with that. So like, I just feel like between them and Israel, like that describes 80% of what's going on there. So it's really hard to know what their angle is on this, but it is. Yeah. I feel like this is a departure for him, because we do know that everyone is usually leaning on him to go pro war. He's not done it. He's resisted before, and it wasn't for. There's no constituency for peace. Tragically, but he's resisted the war machine for no benefit, really. You know what I mean? Just the voters, I guess.
Josh, have you found the Democrats' response to all this a little bit disingenuous?
Oh, I think my first true, I don't know, black pill is the term, but basically what made me totally lose faith in anything going forward was watching the left cheerlead Obama.
Right.
Because back then I was a liberal in college, and then I kind of flirted with the Ron Paul crowd, and I really expected someday to see Jon Stewart on The Daily Show when Obama got elected to switch over to making fun of Obama, and then it never happened. You know what I mean? The left never gave Obama a pause, especially Hillary with Libya and all that stuff.
Yep. So
I absolutely in a deep, permanent allergic reaction level cannot stand the anti-war left. And there's some good ones in the sense that Glenn Greenwald from The Intercept, who I agree with sometimes, he's consistent. He's never liked war, and he still never likes war, and he's still very loud about it. But for the most part, as a movement, it doesn't exist, and it totally disgusts me that watching them come out of the woodwork and feign moral outrage, especially because, again, go back 6 months and you can find articles for them getting mad at Trump for not invading Syria.
Right.
So it's unreal.
Tulsi Gabbard's been pretty consistent.
Yeah.
On this, she posted it was a little mini ad, really. I mean, taking advantage of it, which is fine. That's what they got to do. But I thought her little speech, it was like a 30, 40-second little speech that she posted up, was spot on. It was like, what the heck are you doing? And, the Donald's got to really think about this a little bit, because Iran isn't alone in the Middle East. Shias, there's a lot of them, 500 million or so. But beyond that, there's political ties that they have, and one of those are being Russia. Mm-hmm. Russia's not going to. I can't say what Russia's going to do. Russia and China don't necessarily have to sit by and watch us obliterate Iran. Turkey doesn't have to sit by and watch us obliterate Iran because it's in Turkey's backyard. And I don't know that Turkey and Iran in the last 50 or 100 years or so have been that much at odds militarily. I mean, Turkey doesn't need thousands and hundreds of thousands of people crossing the border and becoming refugees.
And we just did that with when we ceded that, when we backed out, or was it? We gave Turkey permission to enter, it was Syria, it's part of Syria, thing, right?
Yep, northern Syria.
And that was the same thing. I mean, like the media, it was the exact flip situation. Like the left was going crazy that we failed on our allies and all that jazz. And that was kind of a gift to Turkey in a way. But it's crazy how recent that was. It couldn't have been more than a month ago.
No, it was a month ago. Yeah.
Well, it was a month ago, but it feels like in this news cycle, it feels like 4 years ago. But it's crazy to see how the tables are flipping like so fast now.
Yeah, I think, if I remember right, Russia was backing that the Iranian, Iraq, Syria gas line. They had Gazprom had an oil port in Syria, but it was destroyed by ISIS a few years ago. So they had interest in Syria. But I think Josh made the point that. Josh here in the studio made the point that it has more to do with pipelines, and that's absolutely true. It would the keeping the Sunnis and the Shiites fighting with each other has been an advantage for the other powers in the Middle East for decades. Keeping them fighting with each other keeps them broken down, and that's what the U.S. and what Israel wants. Well, they cannot be allowed to have commerce. Because that's the one thing that brings those factions together is commerce.
I think there's two issues. There's the crony issue of the gas and oil. Then there's the political side of just wanting to kill Iran.
Yeah. And that's been a plan for a while.
And they're just working together.
Yeah.
Using the United States as a proxy, basically. Superpowers aren't supposed to be proxies. You're supposed to have the little guys be your proxy. But this is a reverse, where the United States is the proxy for Israel because they hate Israel. Netanyahu definitely hates Israel. Now, how many times has Iran attacked Israel in the last 100 years? 0.
Right.
How many times has the Israeli government done things to Iranians? I don't know, but I know it's not 0.
Well, how many times has Iran attacked anyone in the past 250 years? 0.
And put this in perspective for all the Americans out there that are just pooping their little pants because Iran's going to come destroy America. You can rest at ease. They don't have a blue water navy. They got little gunboats. They can't go crossing oceans. Their Air Force is like 300 aircraft, and most of them are old pieces. All of them are old pieces of junk, but they have some F-14s that don't really work, that kind of held by baleen twine and stuff like that. They have nothing. Let's see. I think their longest range rocket or missile or whatever is 500 miles.
Yeah.
They have no way, 0, no way to inflict any damage on Americans that aren't in their backyard.
There was some piece of propaganda I saw too. This was inside information that Iran was going to strap some nukes that they had bought from North Korea to their rockets and launch them at Israel. But wait a second, I thought Iran already developed its own nuclear weapons. Weren't we told that a few years ago? Why are they having to buy them from North Korea now? So even that story gets flipped around.
I don't think anyone's going to buy anything from North Korea expecting it to work.
He's pretty mad at us too. Not to get off topic, but he's been threatening a Christmas surprise or a New Year's surprise for a couple of days now.
Well, he's probably pissed now because we're not looking at him. We got a new quote unquote nuclear threat to deal with.
When you look at it, I don't know how you can come up with another conclusion. America is the most anti-American nation on earth. If you look at, consider what George Washington said, free trade with all and entangling alliances with none, right? The U.S. doesn't only prohibit free trade for its own citizens, it goes around the planet and destroys free trade among other nations. That is exactly the opposite. I mean, that's precisely the opposite of what Americanism was supposed to be about.
Yeah. And we can't, the Russia factor, we want to bring that back in real quick, because their Nord Stream gas line that produces gas for Europe, Germany, the United States has been trying to knock that out forever. Mm-hmm. And they want, Germany wants Russia's gas. It's cheap, it's direct, it's really close. The United States wants to knock that out. But the only way they can is to guarantee a supply of gas to Europe. And the only way they can do that is this line that they want to build through Iraq and Syria and all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. Even though they're still saying they can do it, I was reading the other day, with their gas tankers. They'll just ship it all in. Of course, we all know how efficient that'll be, a pipeline versus shipping. Yeah, right. So that's why I say Russia's not a bystander in this whole thing, just picking their nose. And I think they're they're less hot-headed, a lot more rational, but they are a actor in all of this. What do you think, David? Jump in.
What do I think? I don't watch news at all, but I've been to Baghdad 3 times. And the situation there is complicated. The situation in Persia, it's complicated. Even in Iraq, it's complicated. The guys so when I was there were all these explosions happening all night, way out in the desert, pretty much every night. And after a few nights, I asked the guys at the base I was staying at, I was like, is that like something to be concerned about? Is that something you guys are doing? And the answer I got was there's some sort of militant Bedouins, essentially, that live out in the desert between the Iranian border and sort of the population centers of southern Iraq. And they view their job as kind of the ultimate gatekeepers against an invasion. And they're not part of really the government or the society. They're kind of their own thing. Mm-hmm. And they're just sort of left out there, and they're sort of armed to the teeth with whatever's been left over from all the wars that have been through the area since the Second World War, I guess. Mm-hmm. And there's all sorts of stuff like that there. There's all sorts of these weird factions. And so the idea that you could exert control over a country there in the way, so the United States is rather pathetically controlled by very poorly produced entertainment that people confuse for news. Mm-hmm. And a bunch of kind of unqualified people in this town in a swamp in Maryland. The entire, there's 330 million people basically who march to the beat of a pretty idiotic drummer, which is the media and DC. That's not the case in the Middle East. Everything is ultra hyper factionalized. So the idea that you're going to control a region by controlling the leaders is like the biggest fantasy of all time, which is obvious. Like, take the Afghanistan situation, right?
Right.
You got like literal shepherds. These are people who live without electricity, and that region can't be controlled. So what makes you think you could control an area through Persia, where there's like real cultural history and cultural identity, long enough to run or sustain some sort of pipeline against the will of people there? It's just the ultimate fantasy that you could control that area. the people who live there can't control the area.
What's actually funny about all this is that it comes in the heels of the Afghanistan papers, which I didn't get all the way through, but I feel like, and a lot of people were saying this should have been the biggest scandal, of 5-10 years minimum. Like, this was a huge expose on how much of a disaster Afghanistan was, and how it was it's largely known. What they're saying, this is known. This is not like, there's obviously some nut jobs like Bolton and a few other the neocon warmonger types, but inside the military and inside the agencies, they kind of know how bad they are at this, because they, that's what the Afghanistan papers showed. They had realized immediately, like, wow, we have zero control over these people who, government can't control them, their own culture, if you could even call it that. Like, these cultures are super factionalized, and that's just not something in America we get, which we should, because it's kind of the foundation of our country is federalism. But these places have like real federalism.
Oh, Josh. Don't start talking sense now. Actually, though, because we haven't talked about the Afghanistan papers, would you just give a brief synopsis on that for people that don't know?
It deserves a real look. But basically, I think, was it Washington Post or New York Times? I forget which one. A lefty outlet produced a huge expose about all this internal documents and communications leaked about Afghanistan war, which basically said the whole thing was a lie almost from the get-go, and that everyone, the whole narrative we were fed, kind of like, ice cream trucks with missiles in them, or, imminent terrorist attacks in undescribed places in Iraq, like right now, was totally bogus, and everyone knew it was. And it wasn't just that it was a lie to the people, it's that everyone from almost the get-go knew it was a total boondoggle and there was no way to win. And it's all internal communication. So it's stuff we kind of already know, but it's really important to see the people who are lying to you say the same thing privately. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yep.
But it's really worth a look. At least read the story. But it's a huge, huge thing. And it got buried. I forget what it was, like whatever outrage of the day was going on, but it totally got buried because of something like impeachment or some other nonsense. But to the point where it almost felt like deliberate, but we had outrage after outrage, so maybe it wasn't deliberate, but really, really, really worth looking into.
Yeah, it was a fantasy, the whole thing. I mean, I have a friend that was over there and was in the Army Air Corps, and he says that the United States killed Saddam Hussein in spring of 2000, or not Saddam, Osama bin Laden in spring of 2002. He was there. He was not too far away from the cave. He was one of the people lasering the cave and communicating with the Air Force when they hit the bombs with it. He was there on a horse when they dug the body out, and he was there when officials came, not just American officials, but officials, he said, from around the world came to identify the body and pay homage to him. And he said it was Saddam Hussein, or Osama bin Laden. They cut his finger off, the end of one of his index fingers, to verify, and then they told everyone, shut up, you never saw this. And he said everyone that he knew that was involved with that said, oh, well, Bush is just saving this for round 2 of his presidential election. And then when it never came out, they've all just been kind of sitting around going, what? But yeah, he swears up and down the United States killed Osama bin Laden in 2002.
I think the complexity that Dave's talking about at the cultural level also goes up to like the macro geopolitical level. Like, I think this is one of the most complex things you could look at, and I don't think any of us are out of the loop, but it's so impossible to talk about how Russia's relationship with Iran, with China, against Israel and all that kind of stuff plays into all this stuff. And it really feels like this is the chessboard that all these giant governments are using to move around, play on. And I just can't imagine anything we're being told is like on the level, especially when we see such blatant lies like with the Afghanistan papers. And it was the Washington Post. I just looked it up, by the way. And with the Afghanistan papers, and we know Iraq was a disaster, even though it's super fun seeing younger people do Iraq war apology stuff now, which is starting to bubble up. It's just such a complex issue, and especially with that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of credible stuff about, Osama bin Laden being dead for a while, or this or that. So it's,
yeah,
daunting.
And you make a good point with credibility. I mean, why anything that comes out of the lips of any of those jackasses, I mean, how could you believe anything they say? Where all you have to do is give them 10 or 15 years for a retraction or the truth to come out. I mean, the only time you can believe the United States government has done something is if they say they haven't. And pretty much whatever they say they've done, believe the opposite, or the reasons why believe the opposite, because they're never truthful with American people. Never. Because it doesn't serve, no, and it doesn't serve a purpose to be truthful.
And it's a real price, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I for a while I thought about this most recent strike and tried to think about how it would possibly make sense. And it's funny, I went back to Ron Paul's old letter of marque. Do you guys remember him talking about that?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's the only way you could have done it. It could have kept, like, quote unquote hands clean, but they didn't go with that at all. They're still leaning in all the way on the. And it's hearing people talk about war powers again, like Democrats talking about war powers. Like, it's just so crazy that they're even trying to justify it when it's just, like you said, I don't think they feel like they even have to. They just have to say some words. And that's enough for a lot of people. They'll just parrot it on Twitter forever.
I'm actually surprised they take the time to even make a narrative. I mean, why? Why even make a narrative? I mean, they're blatant about everything, most everything, right? So
it's
why
to stop us from being Bedouins in the hills? They gotta keep us all kind of enchanted with some story of rule of law.
Ooh la la!
And if it doesn't, as soon as that song, stops being heard, a bunch of people are going to go off into the dunes with old Soviet weapons and start running around. You know what I mean? So the cracks are starting to show in the whole thing. Like, it's getting close. I feel like that song's not going to be believable anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Even with take the impeachment for instance. They're so stupid. Politicians are so dumb. I think even Pelosi's looked down and went, "Oh my gosh, what did I do? I've just destroyed the Democratic Party." I mean, and Tulsi Gabbard's like, "Hey, way to go, Democrats! You've guaranteed Trump to be reelected." That's if you believe the whole narrative that we actually elect presidents, but they've at least destroyed the Democratic Party.
I heard a story that Tulsi is actually running for president in 2024 because she already knows. She's running for the new Democratic Party that will exist when Trump wins and these guys all get fired or whatever.
Right.
That's like her play. But I actually had the flu and I watched or listened to the whole impeachment thing in the background the whole time, and it was unbelievably stupid. Like, besides the normal, I mean, I like to enjoy C-SPAN, and it's usually kind of a low level stuff. It's not esteemed statesman, crafting law on air. It's really, really bad sound points delivered by people who wouldn't pass as like C actors in Hollywood. It was just the worst I've ever seen, ever. And I've been watching politics pretty closely, for 15, 20 years now.
Well, we cannot ever forget that they're not regular people, but they are morons. I mean, we have elected officials still to bring it up again over and over because these are people this is why people shouldn't be able to vote. But we have people in elected office that think islands can tip over if too many people are on one side of the island.
What's his name?
Yeah, many of them really.
Jones, I think it was represented.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, many of them really are mentally handicapped. Pompeo, remember he got up on stage not too long ago, and he bragged about lying, about how useful it is in foreign policy. That it was actually a talk he was doing with some other guy on stage, but. A guy who can get up, straight faced or actually even laughing about it, and brag about how he lied in his career to further an agenda. I mean, the guy is, he's a psychopath. I mean, that's just all there is to it. He's mentally handicapped. He doesn't have remorse for doing things that are wrong. And this is a guy that you trust to tell you the truth about what just happened in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Colin Powell did the same thing, right?
Oh yeah, the bottle of anthrax,
the fake anthrax that he had, that he knew was fake and admitted, and nobody. You'd be hard pressed to find a red-blooded American who thinks that he's a traitor.
He's still walking around, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Free?
Yeah, nobody has any issues with that.
And what's his name? Harry Reid is on camera bragging about totally fabricating the fact that he had evidence that Mitt Romney wasn't paying his taxes. Like, it's not as big as the other ones, but it's him on camera bragging in an interview. It wasn't even like hot mic. He's just like, yeah, I totally made it up, and it totally sunk Mitt Romney's campaign. Like, what are you going to do about it? Like, so casual.
Yeah. Yeah, these are not friends. They're not friends of the American people, that's for sure.
And really, that's kind of I'm not going to say it's a feature, but it's not necessarily a bug. Like, the system itself and getting elected and being in cutthroat DC requires that. So that's kind of why we have the fourth estate, the quote-unquote fourth branch of government. It's supposed to be keeping them in check. But I can't believe how bad the media's been. I mean, it's always never been great, but it's just getting low.
They get money from the government, so it's not. It's not too hard to figure out. Yeah.
Well, I mean, these are people who they'll drag their followers to hell while they think they're on their way to heaven, and the followers will gladly go.
Yeah, it's terrible. The thing that bothers me the most about it is because I've already seen a few things about kind of, if we go to war, we might have to have a draft and this and that. And I have 4 sons that are of draft age, and they might be visiting David permanently here pretty soon, depending on how things go. And that bothers me. And not just my sons, but other people's sons. Not just American sons, but Iranian sons. Human beings. That's what we're talking about. People, not to mention this, back to the original guy that was assassinated, murdered. Who else was in the cars with him? Who else was in the convoy? I mean, did he have along a couple of his grandkids? Anything like that. Not, the United States doesn't have any problem killing little kids.
Collateral. Remember that one?
Yeah.
And I know that got me with Libya. I forget his name. One of Gaddafi's brothers had a kid, and CNN was bragging about him being taken out in a strike, but they left out the information that the kid was like 8.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So they're acting like he was some lieutenant of Gaddafi, like his nephew or whatever. But his nephew was a kid, and CNN just didn't say that. They just left that part out completely, and they ran the story like he was some cutthroat henchman of an evil dictator, and I just couldn't believe that. That was rough. Libya was not a good time.
Well, you remember Trump's very first military action as president was sending those guys into Yemen, and they killed the 7-year-old daughter of I can't remember his name now. Shoot. Bush killed the dad years ago, and then killed the 17-year-old son. And I remember wasn't Rumsfeld, it was one of the people talking about the strike, and they said, well, he picked the wrong dad. Because they said, why did you have to kill the son? He picked the wrong dad. Mm-hmm. And then Trump finished the family off by killing the 7-year-old daughter.
Yeah, and the guy, right.
She was shot. That wasn't a strike. They went into her house, and she was shot in the head by a rifle.
Well, yeah, I think she was 8. I kind of wonder if they wanted to kill her just so that...
By a badass Navy SEAL.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if they wanted her to be killed so that she couldn't talk about the fact that her dad wasn't actually a terrorist. He never carried out a terrorist act. He was accused of being
propaganda.
He was accused of being a cleric who spoke some propaganda, and he was an American citizen as well. What was his name? Look it up. But he was an American citizen who was a cleric who spread some propaganda, and they offed him for it. And then they killed his kids. And of course, Trump got up on stage, remember, and had a party to celebrate the guy that murdered the little kid.
Yeah.
And all of America cheered behind him. Oh, what a hero. He murdered an 8-year-old girl.
Anwar al-Awlaki.
Yeah. That's who we're... Yeah.
It's interesting, this story right here, NBC News. Trump's first military action kills 2 Americans. That's how the story reads. One was the Navy SEAL that got killed, and the other one was the 8-year-old daughter of Anwar al-Awlaki that they shot.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like 2 Americans were killed.
Yeah, one of the Americans you killed, you murdered. Yeah, it was a little girl.
You killed.
But they didn't mention her, I don't think, during that party, did they?
No. Anyways, we got to take a break. Sorry, guys. We'll be right back.
After the drone strike that took out Iranian General Qassem Suleimani and several militia members, tens of thousands attending a funeral procession for him in Baghdad. This, as Army Major Charlie Dietz reports, at least 2 rockets were fired into Baghdad's green zone a short time ago, where the U.S. Embassy is located. The embassy wasn't hit. Dietz says Iraq's Balad Air Base was. U.S. service members are stationed at that base. U.S. citizens have been told to leave Iraq, and American oil workers already left the Iraqi port city of Basra. The UK also telling its citizens to leave. The U.S. and its allies stepping up security at consulates and embassies around the world. Germany also increasing security to protect Jews in their country. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressed support for the strike that killed Soleimani.
The top Iranian general saying they have up to 35 different American-related targets throughout the region, as well as the ability to target the Israeli city of Tel Aviv. All of this extremely concerning, as Iran's UN ambassador said today that his country is prepared for a military war that he says President Trump waged by killing this top Iranian general.
Fox's Trey Yingst in Jordan. The response from members of Congress largely along party lines.
The Republicans called the strike decisive, despite the risk of retaliation. Democrats called it a reckless escalation. But for his part, the president said plain and simple, General Soleimani was a terrorist who had to be stopped.
Fox's Kevin Corke. Democrats say congressional leaders should have been notified prior to that strike. America is listening to Fox.
I don't work for an oil company.
I've never been to the slope.
I work in retail.
I'm into renewable energy.
I bike to work.
But I'm in the oil business.
I'm in the oil business.
And I'm in the oil business.
Because I'm an Alaskan.
Oil revenue means I pay less in taxes.
It means permanent fund dividend checks I'm saving for my kids' college.
Well, 1/3 of all Alaska jobs comes from oil.
So it matters to me that we keep oil production up.
It matters to me that we're encouraging responsible development, new projects, and new discoveries.
It matters to me that, we keep oil in the pipeline.
Because it's not just the oil business, it's my business.
It's my business.
It's your business. Hi, I'm Katie Capozzi, President and CEO of the Alaska Chamber of Commerce. Learn more about how we promote a positive business climate in Alaska at alaskachamber.com.
Jen, I think I might be pregnant.
Really? Are you sure?
No, but I'm kind of freaking out and I don't know what to do.
I felt the same way when I got pregnant, but I went to the Find Out Free Pregnancy Center for a free pregnancy test. They were so sweet to me. They were there to answer my questions, explore my options, and help me process everything.
I'm really scared.
Don't worry. It's completely confidential. Find Out Free was there for me every step of the way. Call them, 455-8255.
Tired of finding that shower curtain, trying to keep it tucked in, or cleaning up after someone who didn't? A decorative glass shower door from Glass Doctor can not only keep your floors dry, it can add value to your home and become a perfect centerpiece to that bathroom remodel. You can choose from options like heavy glass enclosures, the tub sliding doors, and everything in between. With locations in Anchorage, Wasilla, North Pole, and Fairbanks, it's easy to schedule a free in-home consult to find out just how affordable luxury can be.
Call the Glass Doctor, will fix your paint.
At glassdoctor.com.
Ice fishing is a heck of a lot of fun for the whole family, but you have to be prepared. And the place you get prepared is Frontier Outfitters, where you'll find the rods, reels, and tackle you need. You'll also find a variety of augers, snowshoes, winter boots, and clothing, and your license as well. If you need snow machine and ATV accessories, accessories, they're right downstairs at Century Hardware. Your next outdoor adventure begins with Frontier Outfitters for your Alaskan lifestyle. Frontier Outfitters in the Gavora Mall.
Is that
Freedom ring. All right. Welcome back to Patriot. So my name is Joshua Bennett. We got 2 more hours here of some fine action on the radio. In the studio, got Mike Anderson. Morning, Mike.
Morning.
And on the phones here and on YouTube, got David Giesel. Good morning, David.
Morning, Josh.
And Josh number 1, old friend of all of ours. Morning, Josh.
Hello. How you doing?
Good, good. All right. So this song appropriately is going to lead us into another direction, a little closer to home. Not that the last subject is unimportant, but I think there's something important going on here. Interesting. What I'm talking about is another reason why people shouldn't be able to vote. The recent election in Virginia saw the Democrats take a majority in the House and Senate of the Virginia legislature. Not by a large margin, just a few. But the governor is a worthless piece of garbage. He's the same governor that said that, probably it's okay to let babies be born and then decide if you want to kill them or not. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's the difference?
Yeah,
it's got a good point.
Got to keep them comfortable.
You got to keep them alive and comfortable till you're ready to kill them, harvest them. Yeah.
Right. Good guy. Yeah. Wants to keep comfortable. I like to keep him comfortable sometimes. So the Democrats there ran on one of the things that they ran on there was being anti-gun, gun. Yes. And so there's approximately, from what I can see, 8 different laws that they're wanting to pass as soon as the new legislative session starts, which is on the 8th of January. Interesting that it's in Virginia for one, but a couple of the different things they want to do is implement the red flag laws that our good, great orange Trump is all for. They want to have a complete registration of all firearms, and they want to ban those evil black semi-automatic weapons called assault rifles. That's what AR stands for. Assault Rifle -15. No, it's not actually. It stands for Armalite. So they want to outright ban them. Now, in Virginia, they have these things called counties. We don't here. We have boroughs. And that's not a donkey. It's an area of land. They have counties. The northern few counties are the where the populace, there's more people, heavily populated, and they're liberals because they're really close to Washington, D.C. Power center, liberals. The bottom section, below all those few counties, which I think it's only like 5, the other 100 and some counties, they're good old-fashioned Merkins that just go and work. They're farmers and store clerks and whatnot and what have yous. The guys that you would watch on the Andy Griffith Show. Mayberry types. In response to what they believe is going to happen, many of these, well, I think all of them now, they've been divided up. The other counties, besides the northern ones that voted in the Democrats, have established what they call Second Amendment sanctuary counties, where the sheriffs of said counties have said, hell no, we won't take their guns. We will defy any laws coming from the state capitol to confiscate weapons from our citizens. The sheriffs have, the different city councils have gotten together, and which is kind of funny because the sheriff doesn't really listen to city councils, but if he feels like it, he can. But it's good to have backup in such cases. So these different city councils have gotten together and said, we are a Second Amendment sanctuary city or county. And where did they get this? From none other but the Democrats, who were correct in making sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants from the evil Great Orange, the Donald Trump. Now, the same people that literally have the governor created sanctuary cities in the state of Virginia is saying that sanctuary counties to protect weapons, the right to bear weapons, is illegal. Why? Because he doesn't like guns and he likes immigrants. Politically expedient either way that he turns. The sheriffs have, one county I saw, a sheriff had deputized 10,000 of his residents to be deputy sheriffs. Now, you cannot arm a deputy sheriff when you do something like that, but they can have their own weapons on them because you have the right to keep and bear arms. If you don't know the significance of the state of Virginia, you need to pick up Conceived in Liberty and read the whole thing, particularly around the whole thing. Virginia was pretty important in the founding of America, and Virginia brought forth many, many good men, none, not least of being Thomas Jefferson and George Mason, and most of all, the great Patrick Henry. Of course, George Washington, James Madison, I believe Monroe, they were all Virginians. The great Robert E. Lee was a Virginian. I think Virginia was the very first colony after the Declaration of Independence to create their own colonial state constitution. Sovereign constitution, of course, because there was no federal government. The state of Virginia was its own sovereign nation. and even after the Constitution, they still said they were their own sovereign nation. They were Virginians, not Americans. In the Virginia Constitution, which George Mason and James Madison co-wrote together, their Bill of Rights, which is where most of our federal Bill of Rights come from, is from the Virginia Constitution. One of the, you know what, let's not take my word for it. Let's just read the particular Bill of Rights that I want to bring up. Article 1, Section 13, Bill of Rights, the State of Virginia. And again, you'll notice the similarities with the United States Constitution. That a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the proper and natural and safe defense for a free state. Therefore, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I love this part. And that standing armies in a time of peace should be avoided as dangerous to all liberty. And that in all cases, the military should be under strict subordination to and governed by the civil power. I think this part's rather interesting because the governor of the state of Virginia has said, because he has a standing army, that Virginia said don't have, if you sheriffs won't follow the law that we pass, I'll send in the National Guard and we will have you fired and removed from office, and the National Guard will do what I tell them to do, which I've read the National Guard folks have been abandoning the National Guard in droves. The Attorney General for the state of Virginia, the one that's now, he said that, well, you can't have sanctuaries. Any law that the legislature passes, you have to uphold and obey because we're the law. These people mistakenly think that law comes from man's lips. Mistakenly think that if they're voted in, they are the high power and they get to do whatever they want. And they're saying that these sheriffs will be violating their oath of office by not upholding the law, even though I know that the sheriffs there take a oath of office to defend the Constitution of the United States and defend the Constitution of the state of Virginia against all enemies, foreign and most importantly, because there's never a foreign enemy, they're all domestic. So their first obligation, of course, is to the Virginia Constitution. The sheriffs of a county are the highest law of the land because they're the closest elected people in an area, in the counties. The people that live in that county directly vote for that sheriff, and he is obligated to them. He's not obligated to a mayor. He's not obligated to a city council. He's not obligated to a state legislator or a state governor. He's not obligated to no stinking president of the United States. In fact, a sheriff can tell the president of the United States, you cannot come into my county. He is the man.
The sheriff is the highest law of the land, right?
Correct. And
officially.
We can get into some of that historical stuff a little bit later, but I want to open it up to you three folks that are with me here today and just get, there is, I'll throw in this too, they are planning a march, I believe a march on the Capitol, I believe on the 13th or the 18th or something like that, where they are asking folks to just walk right in, sit right down, daddy, let your guns roll on, to come to the Capitol armed and protest the laws. Now, there's lots of websites and, you know, the Instagram dudes and I'm sure the Facebooks and the Twitter boogaloos are all talking about, oh boy, here we go. Oh, where's my backpack? Oh, let's see. I got 72 hours there. You know, they're calling Michael Dukes. Hey, I need another backpack. This might go longer than 72 hours. And they're oiling their guns and they're mostly putting up good memes and they're, you know, typewriter or not typewriter, keyboard commandos. Yeah, ready to get it on. But I do have to say that some of these sheriffs that I've read are pretty brave fellows. Like, got a little bit of their, as Samuel Adams used to tell us about, and actually Patrick Henry, they kind of copied each other on this, on their ancient fathers' constitutions. Now, they were talking about a little bit different. They weren't talking about a written constitution when Adams and Henry spoke these things. But some of these sheriffs are like, you know what? They're not bad guys. And I think what they're doing is the correct thing, protecting their people. And, you know, I don't want to say their citizens. They're protecting their neighbors, their friends, because a lot of these counties are pretty small. And they do have the power to do it. I know when I lived in Idaho, we had a sheriff in the county next to ours. I lived about 6 miles from the border of the county. And when he got elected, he told the federal government, I shall not allow any BLM agents in my county. If you do come here, you cannot be armed and you cannot do any law enforcement. Well, of course, the federal government sent a couple BLM guys over there just to test the waters. They came in with their pistols. They were strapped on, and he pulled them over to see if they were armed. They were. He arrested them, threw them in jail. And did the federal government send in tanks? Did the state governor send in the National Guard? No, because they knew he was fully in his right to do that. And he kept them in there. I don't know, maybe waterboarded them a little or something good like that before he let them go and said, now y'all tell your bosses back there. I'm just imagining Andy Taylor, Andy Griffith's show. Now, y'all tell your bosses back there that you're welcome to come here, but don't come armed again, because I'm serious. So they do have the right. Even in recent times, they have that power. So what do you guys? I of course don't want to see a revolution that's killing people start, but I definitely do not want to see these guys just lay over and turn their guns over to these freak shows.
I think it's really fun to start this off with describing Virginia's state flag, which has a lady standing over a tyrant who's dead, and this is Sic Semper Tyrannus. So I think it's just a really interesting place for all this to be happening, especially with the historical background you've given. But this is a good segue from talking about the Middle East, because I think it's similar in the sense that basically everything you hear is not true officially.
Right.
This is not about, it's all euphemisms. It's not about gun safety. It's not about any of that stuff. But unlike the Middle East, we actually have access to all the information. Like, this is something where we have all the information about what's going on, and it's because we have campaign donation tracking, we have all the minutes from bills, we have, Beto O'Rourke, God bless him for being such a moron.
He is great, though.
Yeah, he was, great for sound bites, which is something at least. But, so we know the score on this one. Unlike the Middle East, where we can only guess, we see bad stuff, we don't know why it's all happening exactly, but this, we know exactly what's going on. So it's a much, I'm not going to say deeper, but we are allowed to have more depth on this topic. I think it's worth starting off with that this is really interesting in a couple ways, because we haven't seen overreach like this in the same way, at least this dramatic, this fast, and I think it's a new thing. Just a couple of years ago, pre-presidential election, they were still talking about not taking our guns, and that being something that's a conspiracy theory on the right. But now we have Virginia doing this, and we also have Washington State, where I live, doing the same thing. Very, very similar laws and not as much attention right now. But both states have very similar bills pre-filed, and both bills don't have a grandfather clause and will effectively make people who have these weapons felons on the day they pass.
Right.
Additionally, it has nothing to do with gun violence or gun safety. At least in Washington, I looked at the list of banned weapons, which goes down to specific weapon and specific, brand or whatever. And it had a Barrett 50 cal on the list in Washington, which, how many homicides have been, committed in the United States, at least, with a Barrett 50 cal? It's got to be, zero, effectively. So it's really not about gun safety.
Yeah, I'd say
that up completely.
I'd say the top murderers that use Barrett 50 calibers would be the United States military.
Yeah, this isn't Missouri, Washington State, so they get an exemption, of course.
No, it's nonsense to say that it's all about or anything about gun safety or violence or anything. It has nothing to do with that.
Or hunting. That's the worst one. That's
my gosh.
Such a naive angle on this whole thing. But you'll see it come up in official language at the state government level routinely. I promise you will hear people talk about hunting on, I think it's January 20th is the, what do they call it? The Advocacy Day or Lobby Day?
Right.
Yeah, Lobby Day. I promise that will come up as a hunting thing. Even though people use quote-unquote assault weapons for hunting. I mean, I don't, like AR-15s, for example, or 300 backouts for pigs I've heard about. So the first thing to talk about is this is just nothing to do with what is being, the official narrative is completely false. And unlike the Middle East, we don't have to infer it. We can obviously know it. The facts are all out there.
Yep. Well, and I don't think it's foolish for the quote unquote pro gun people to even bring up hunting. I've always thought it's dumb to bring up any reason at all for having a weapon or for defending the Second Amendment or, your state constitution, your right to bear arms. Forget amendments, forget Bill of Rights, because the Bill of Rights wasn't anything saying it was not a grant or anything. I've always thought it's dumb to bring up any situation of why you should be able to have a gun except for the original intent of why it was in there. No, we are allowed to keep and bear arms so we can shoot you if you become a tyrant. Period. That's the only reason it's there, because they didn't have to tell them they could have a gun to hunt. Everyone in the world could have a gun so they could go hunting. They didn't have to tell them they could have a gun so they could defend themselves from the hordes coming into their house and try to steal their food and take their wife. Of course. This was the first time where Americans said, we are keeping our guns because if you jackasses become tyrants again, we're going to take you out. And now I'm not saying take anybody out or anything like that. I'm just saying forget the reasons. This is the only reason that it's in there.
Yeah, and you're talking about Mason and the Virginians at the Constitutional Convention. Well, they were the anti-federalists. And they didn't want the federal government to even come into existence. Like you said, Virginia was their own nation. Their concern was that they needed to raise up a statewide militia to defend against a federal force that had just been created. Because remember, the Bill of Rights wasn't ratified till a couple of years after the Constitution. It's a separate document, essentially. And they wouldn't ratify the Constitution until the Bill of Rights was in place. Right. But it took a couple of years to get that through. But yeah, the concern that Mason had was about being able to raise up a statewide militia to defend against the federal force. And they didn't, and they were also they also were opposed to a standing army. They didn't want to have some standing National Guard. That wasn't a concept that was in their minds yet. It didn't exist at the time. It wasn't until 1903 that came into existence. And so the National Guard, as it exists, is nothing more than a standing army by the considerations of the founders. As is the full-time military. So,
and I think your point about I think the whole thing is false on its face because obviously the Constitution allows arms, and obviously if you read the Federalist Papers and all that, it's pretty clear how they all felt. And then the hunting thing is totally disingenuous, which is the whole problem with this debate, is that you have a lot of nice semi-conservative people who have a hunting rifle or two who, when they're told that they only need it for hunting, they give that line of rhetoric any credence, they give it any thought. Because the problem is this whole thing is overtly about disarmament.
Yes.
It's not, so when someone comes at you and is just straight lying, a normal, polite, regular person who maybe hasn't read the Constitution in 5, 10, 20 years wants to stop and kind of give that argument a little bit of credit, because that's how polite discourse is done. But the interesting thing about the gun debate, even more than most political debates, even though I don't think any of them are really honest in the true sense, but the gun debate is completely one-sided when it comes to honesty, in that there is zero actual interest in stopping gun violence, which is the whole narrative, or gun safety for that matter.
Excellent point.
And so the whole thing about hunting and assault rifles and weapons of war and all these rhetorical flourishes they have are completely detached from reality. It is purely about the government. Because if you really wanted to stop any kind of gun violence, like something like 90% of gun violence is inner cities and pistols. And 1% of gun violence is rifles in general, like all rifles. Certainly not Barrett 50 cal, you know. So if there was any interest in solving this as a problem, they would go in the opposite direction they're going in, which is basically an urban versus rural thing. Like a lot of the people who own assault rifles, in air quotes, are not in the city, and those people are who they're after. Like, so this is not even vaguely about what they say it is. So you got to walk into this issue and immediately assume the other side's completely lying. And I actually found a 100-page PDF, probably cost a few $1 million to make in some DC think tank. It came out a couple of years ago after. It was basically a pro-gun control lobby talking point book, and it came out right after Fast and Furious, and they had lots of talking points on how to say Fast and Furious and blah blah blah. Like, they basically said it was all their talking points, and it was just trying to dismantle arguments. There was no actual case for anything they're saying. So it really is pure rhetoric. Sophistry, if that's probably more accurate. There's really no meat to this at all. Go ahead.
I was going to say, part of the problem with, what you're talking about with the nice people that have a couple hunting rifles and stuff, the reason part of the reason I think that, I don't even want to say our side, but those nice folks, part of the reason that they're at a disadvantage also is that they, to a certain extent, also believe in the legitimacy of the government as much as the people making the laws that want to ban the guns. There's no disconnect government-wise with the two sides, right? You have the gun owners, even though this government is saying, well, we're going to take your guns, in the back of their mind, they're still saying, well, they're elected officials. They are the government. Where the progressives have the commies have the advantage of, yeah, we are the government, and we're going to do this, and we've been teaching you and your children for the last 100 years that we're legitimate and everything we do is legitimate. And we haven't been teaching you for the last 100 years what did happen 250 years ago, or 400 years ago, or 700 years ago, or 150 years ago. We're not telling you that part. We're just teaching you everything we want you to know for the last 100 years.
And it's a shame how effective that is, because the beauty of comparative politics, which is where you basically compare two groups and kind of try to use them as a control, but you can't really get true scientific controls in social sciences. And so basically you can look at some place like California and say, has their gun control lowered their gun violence rate? The government come in and said, these guns are dangerous, we have to stop it. So you can look and see if that happened, and it really hasn't. And on top of that, they have to use these mangled. Have you ever seen like a AR-15 that's California compliant? It's a tragedy. It's all the weird no pistol grip and the awkward stock and the tiny magazine. It's a horrible thing. And the trade-off for that is, in theory, a safer state. And I've lived in California semi-recently, and it's not a very safe place, and it's still got lots of violence. Not the worst in the world, but it's certainly not nicer than places that have gun laws in any kind of quantifiable way. And then you can even go a step further, which I used to use as a joke, but is full-on reality now as it tends to happen. But you can go to the UK, and they banned guns in the 80s, I want to say, and now they're going full-on banning knives.
Right.
There's serious white papers done by serious people with all sorts of fancy letters after their name about what the cost-benefit analysis of taking every single tip off of every single knife on the whole island, so you can't stab anybody anymore. That's a serious thing. Like that's how deep this whole goes. Is they'll start talking about padding rocks and not letting people make shivs. Like, it's going to go all the way. There's no bottom to this argument. So really, you just don't have to trust their motives. You can see where it all goes. There's like a clearly laid out path. It really has to stop as soon as possible. Or honestly, 20 years ago.
Now you need a permit to buy a baseball bat or a tire iron, right?
Or spoons.
Can't change your tire anymore. You need a permit to buy the tool.
And that sounds bombastic, but that's really where they are ahead of us.
Yeah.
But so I basically think that the whole, like, if you walk into the gun debate, you have to know immediately the talking points on the left are not factual. They're disingenuous. And the reason for that is it's a pure political I win button for Democrats. And that's because their base hates it. And they don't care. The only negative for that is that it upsets Republicans. They risk galvanizing conservatives or pro-gun people, and they decided that it's worth it. And that's a calculated decision they made. It's not been the trend for a while. After the assault weapons ban in the 90s, the narrative on the left in the higher up political circles was don't touch gun control, the NRA will get you. But that's worn off, and now they're deciding that they should go for it again. And it's purely about energizing their base at no cost.
Right.
And it's a unique issue in that it doesn't upset any of their demographics, any of their voting bases, really, at all. So it's a free button. It's really the only free button. So they're jamming on it like crazy.
You guys want to take a couple calls here?
Sure.
Yeah, let's try that. I actually don't know how it works. It's the line's busy, but we'll see. Hello, caller, are you there? Ooh, a little bit of.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't hear the beat.
Oh.
Hey, this is Rick.
Go ahead, Rick.
One of the things about this whole thing, and you started to get onto that a little bit here with this last caller, about where people believe in, the same authority that's making these anti-gun laws, etc. And that was one of the things. Last week we had that shooting, that white church shooting. Where that guy opened fire in the church and the
white settlement, settlement, Texas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I was watching the footage afterwards, of people, giving interviews and stuff, and the head minister or preacher or whatever. One of the things that struck me was that he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, "Thank God the government allowed us to defend ourselves."
Yeah. Well, you saw the video of that shooting, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, compare that to the New Zealand shooting that was live streamed by that guy. What, he killed how many? 50 people, something like that.
Yeah, and it was like 45 minutes.
Yeah, and none of them were armed. But the shooting in Texas, it ended in 5 seconds or less.
About now, it was actually more than that, because it took the guy almost 5 seconds to get his gun out of his holster. Otherwise, it would have been in the
maybe 7 seconds. Then yeah,
it was fast. I mean, and he saved. The guy was just about to shoot a third person, and then he stopped him. But the same thing. The first guy that got shot, he was drawing a gun when he was hit, and he was too slow getting it. You got to have a 1 second draw. If you're going to be in this, if you're going to be a security guy working and that's what those people were. They were security people. But my point was more, not to the specifics of how they defended themselves, because they did pretty well, I think. But the main thing was this idea that the minister had that thank God we were able to protect ourselves because the government allowed it. It's like the government doesn't allow you to protect yourself. That isn't where it comes from.
No, they take it away if they can.
Yeah. I guess it's more the idea that even if they do outlaw it, who cares?
Yeah,
they don't have a right to outlaw or to take away your right to defend yourself. Period.
No, you're right. It should be irrelevant what the government says.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is they can't allow it because it's not something the government can allow. It's part of your basic existence.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many people that if the government outlawed it, I guess I'll turn my gun in.
Yeah, that's the problem with even the many of the most conservative gun advocates is that they still think the Second Amendment gives them the right.
Right.
It's not the case. They were born to have it. Government has no play in it whatsoever, except that they'll commit violence against you if you do what they don't like.
Right. And I see that over and over and over. You'll see the congressman on TV or whatever talking about that, and it says, yes, there's this big battle over the Second Amendment. It's like, none of that matters. None of that matters. It's this idea that, that's why I don't have anything to do with the NRA anymore, because it's like, they're just fighting. They're just trying to get you into the, left-right paradigm.
Yeah, trying to get you to go vote for a new master, right?
And basically, and to buy into the idea that the government determines what your rights are.
Mm-hmm.
That's ultimately what that piece of paper called the Constitution is all about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm a big Lysander Spooner fan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Constitution just keeps people's minds in a box.
Exactly.
The box they want.
But to me, that's just it's disheartening, because these are good people that believe this kind of thing, and so they'll submit without a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, if all the left has to do, like in Virginia, is outlaw it, and then suddenly we have to obey.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know I'll be shocked if they really fight in Virginia.
And your point's totally right in that their ultimate goal is not just ban guns, it's to kill gun culture. And they don't need to do that. They don't need to do that now or in 5 years. Just like with the anti-federalists saying that if you write down the Bill of Rights, people are going to think that the government's giving them these rights, or that these don't come from God in some ways. But just like with Australia and New Zealand, they recently had gun bans, and their turnover rates, so like their confiscation rates, are very, very low. But they've effectively criminalized the culture, and what that means is that the people who hold onto their guns. Am I coming in echoey for you guys?
Yeah, I'm hearing one.
I hear a slight echo,
but
you're totally understandable.
Okay. So basically, they confiscated guns and they got less than 25% turn-in rate. But what they did is they effectively criminalized the gun culture, which means these people are going to hold on to their guns buried in their backyards, and then their kids are going to turn them in when they die, and then that's it. And it's incrementalism, and it's a long game. So even if you're right, and it's because people, like you said, people forgot where their rights come from or why they even exist, or you're kind of in the popular kind of zeitgeist. If you talk about the Constitution, you're pretty far to the right of a lot of people. A lot of people don't even know it exists, have never read it, don't understand their rights, according to it. So even just referring to it puts you outside of the bubble of a lot of people. A lot of people aren't even on that wavelength. So,
well, I wonder, one of the things I've always wondered about with this, I haven't really wondered about it because I know. Let's go back to 1770s, okay, just for fun, pretend time. Just about, well, I would venture to say every home had a weapon or two in it. Every single one, right? Mm-hmm. Fast forward 50 years, probably almost every home had a weapon in it. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to now, and not even close to every home has a weapon in it. Maybe half. I don't know what the actual numbers are. Mm-hmm. And yet, if you back up to the 1770s, the quote-unquote gun violence, there was some, but it was usually government on citizen. Mm-hmm. But citizen on citizen, per capita, based on how many guns there were, citizens that had guns, because everyone was armed. It was just the way, it was the culture. They didn't have gun violence. You fast forward up. So we get to now. The problem isn't that there's so many guns out there. Have guns become more violent on their own in the last 250 years? or has the culture gotten more violent? And if it's the culture, if people have gotten more violent, why? Why have people gotten more violent? So what's more important to figure out? We know that guns are inanimate objects that can't get violent on their own. So what's been the real change? What's different from then and now? It's because they're all colored black now? No, because you can still go buy a musket and they're not jumping out murdering people on their own. It takes human action to murder people. And like Josh was referencing to, you don't need a gun. You can use a spoon. You can use a screwdriver. You can use a knife. You can use a car. The towers were brought down by, well, no, I wouldn't even bring that. Airplanes. People that are going to kill are going to kill. So take the guns away from them. Then what? They're going to start making bombs?
But you ask the question, why now more than back then?
Yeah.
Well, it's not just an American thing. You look up news in China, and there's repeated stories of mass stabbings. There was one not too long ago in an airport. Some I can't know, man or a woman.
They walk into a medical clinic or something and just start stabbing people.
Yeah, there's one at an airport in China where some person pulled out a knife and killed 15 people.
Yep, because the police, Chinese people it's a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. They have a big bystander effect over there. Mm-hmm. Nobody will help you once you get attacked. Nobody. Yeah. Not like here in the U.S. where somebody, a good guy will step in and try and help or something, but it's kind of a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, that's a good point, because I don't know. Does the violence tend to be concentrated here in areas where people don't step in? Because there are places where people just don't step in.
Right. I think the reason it is, it used to be back in the 1700s, you could escape from the pressure cooker. You could move west. You could do, there was still expansion room. I don't think that is the case anymore. The government is clamping down, on everything, and people are, we're in a pressure cooker.
That's a super amazing point, and I haven't read a book on this, but there's a really good academic study on the cultural value of frontiers. It came out, I want to say it was last year. And it basically, the premise is that society relies on an outlet valve existing to like quote unquote troublemakers, the non-conformers, to be able to leave and go someplace else. And for the first time genuinely in human history, that's kind of gone. Yeah, so that's a really interesting point.
Until and unless we can break the space barrier.
Yeah, then we're in space.
Anyway, those are really good points, and thanks for letting me chime in. And enjoyed the conversation, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
Talk to you later. Have a good one.
You too, man.
Thanks for the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
There was an interesting commentary this guy Jonathan Peugeot put up on YouTube. A commentary on Apple CEO Tim Cook's speech at I think it was at the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League Summit from a year ago. And Tim Cook in that speech basically justified his company, which is just any tech company in the Bay Area. They're all interchangeable, basically. He justified their position in banning guys like Alex Jones, these dangerous conspiracy theorists, because they incite violence. And he said that he said a bunch of things in there. One of the things he said in there was that something along the lines of like hopelessness should be made illegal or something like that. And it was basically a statement that it was a euphemistic way of saying that if you don't believe the narrative that's being put out by us about the future, you should be removed from society. And so it was a speech about inclusiveness that was almost exclusively about forcibly removing people. And one of the aspects of that speech that Jonathan Pajot pointed out was that Tim Cook's company distributes music that talks about killing people. If you go on the iTunes store, you can download songs by Cannibal Corpse or, Big E or any of these rapper guys. You could download all sorts of death metal and rap about dismembering people and about killing your boss, killing your wife, killing your kids, and you get paid. Apple actually pays people money to make music about that. And here Tim Cook is pointing the finger at Alex Jones for inciting violence, when actually Tim Cook monetizes it. There's another YouTube talk I saw that was pretty similar, which was this guy talking about, he was talking about American culture's blind spot in, well, actually worse than a blind spot. He was talking about how American culture has actually encouraged the minority groups within America to promote the killing of each other. You can have a song about a black guy killing another black guy will be funded and produced by Universal Records. But a song about, if you made a song about you had a song by Justin Bieber about, shooting some senator or something like that, there's no way that would be released, right? There's no way. There's a massive double standard. And this other guy's talk, I can't remember his name, but he said that if the culture gives up its social responsibility to discourage negative messages in media and in the social narrative, no one should be surprised at the physical outcome, which is going to be murder in this case. And then to blame the tools of murder was to completely miss the abdication of responsibility to your society of socially enforcing narratives, because some narratives are constructive to your society and some narratives are destructive, and there have been destructive ones that have not only been tolerated but have been encouraged and monetized. And I thought that both Pajot's talk about Tim Cook's hypocrisy of paying people to make music about killing people while banning Alex Jones, I thought both that talk and this other guy's talk about American culture basically promoting minorities killing each other actively were a lot more to the point than anything relating to gun control and gun violence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally. It's kind of a unreligious version of faith promoting. Like this kind of topic is not faith promoting. This topic is faith promoting, which I've heard in religious circles about different kind of media, but it's the same thing on the left. Even if it's not religious, they're still saying the same thing, like don't go off message, and if you do, it's not allowed. And it's just that version. It's free speech without free speech. And like you said, it also implies a narrative, like they are okay with gun violence. They're just okay with it in cities with minorities typically, or gang violence. They're fine with that. Which even highlights even further that they just don't care about the real issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of it does depend on who is committing the violence.
Mm-hmm. And who it's committed against.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe even more important.
Yeah, well, you hear about they talk about mass shootings, and they're trying to popularize the idea of school shootings. But most of the mass shootings that occur annually in the U.S. are gang shootings. They're just gang members against gang members.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as school shootings goes, whenever they report a school shooting, You hear like 350 or so school shootings a year. Anytime that a firearm is discharged within a school zone is considered a school shooting, and that includes a cop. I mean, there was a YouTube video a few years ago of a cop who was demonstrating a gun in his sidearm in class. They're junior high students, I think it was, and it went off and shot him. He shot himself in the leg. Did a Barney Fife on himself. That's reportable as a school shooting.
And you'll see that if you go into any numbers on school shootings, if you go one level deeper than they present, you'll find a million examples of that. It's just they're all tragic, especially the ones that we all know about. But as far as gun violence, the statistical noise, there's not an epidemic. It's not much worse than other places, especially when you get into per capita ratings. Like U.S. is actually not worse than places that have no guns. I think Norway still beats us because they had a particularly horrific one a while back. That was so bad that relative to their population, they're still beating us quite a bit. It's not about saving lives at all, as we said, because again, they even push back on having on guards or on teachers. That's like totally reprehensible. And even I still am a little shocked about this, but if you watch CNN because you hate yourself the day after the Texas shooting, you would have seen people being horrified. Not that there was a shooting, but that the parishioners were armed. They were horrified that there were people sitting in church, like 7 or 8 people that we could see on camera with weapons, and they were horrified by that. They were more disgusted by that than some crazy guy coming in and shotgunning some people. Like it just shows that they don't like that. They don't like people being armed. That's the offensive thing, not death.
Yeah. Yeah, your kids are more likely to die on the school bus on the way to school than they are in a school shooting.
Yeah. And if someone gets bored, the CDC has all this data out there. I actually went into a state-by-state level the other day to look at it, and it's exactly what you'd expect. Like, shootings are a real thing, but they're dramatically not in the top 10 or 20, especially when you get into the real numbers, which are usually inflated with like officer shootings and suicides and all that kind of stuff. And they have tons, like it's basically a data argument. All the rhetorical stuff on the left is about data, and they'll say that there's this many shootings, but that's including a million examples. There's, like you said, with the school shootings, they inflate everything. And we get to the real numbers, it's pretty low. Again, all murder and suicide is tragic, but the narrative they're trying to draw that it's a huge crisis and that we're barbarians because the rest of the civilized world has gotten rid of guns and we haven't. It just doesn't hold up at all. For even like a 30-minute Wikipedia CDC data look at, like you just go check it out. It's so easy to settle everything on their side.
Yeah, and it's a pretty hot topic. I think abortion used to be the big hot topic. It's kind of gone, not by the wayside, but it's not the hot topic that it is now. But the gun issue, I think, is probably the number one hot button, if you want to call it a hot, what's the hottest thing to get people riled up on, blah, blah, blah. There's some economic things, but guns, bring up guns, and boom, people get excited on both sides.
I think you're totally right. I think abortion, it's not heating up on the right quite yet again, not like it used to, but on the left, they're very, very scared about the abortion issue being revisited. And part of that is, like, the way to watch all this stuff, it's not satisfying or quick, but the place to watch all the conversation on both abortion and guns is Supreme Court right now, which is, they're looking at stuff again, and it'll be interesting. It's gone pretty conservative, but I haven't gone into Kavanaugh's background very much, but the left was very afraid of him because they thought that he would overturn Roe. Like, you'll see people making predictions that Roe would have already been overturned by now, and it hasn't happened yet. But Supreme Court is going to be the battleground for both these issues in the next year. It'll be very interesting to watch. There's a gun case in the Supreme Court right now.
Yep.
And oral arguments were in December. And it's a pretty minor case, honestly, but there's almost no way it's going to go the direction the left wants it to. And with one caveat that once the prosecutors on the left found out that it was going to Supreme Court, they repealed the whole law, or they had the New York government repeal the whole law to make the case moot. They basically tactically removed the law from the book to try and not get it decided upon. Because they're terrified of this, because the court has gone majority conservative, and they are actually terrified that a ruling will go through. But there's several cases on the docket, if you will. Only one has been heard so far, but even if they moot this New York case, they're going to go for other ones too. So it's on the radar. If you want to watch this stuff, there's lots of talk in the legal circles about this, because people are getting nervous about it.
Yeah, and it's funny how both sides of the political spectrum have a love-hate relationship with the Supreme Court. You know, when it goes their way, they think that the Supreme Court should be the ultimate rule of the land. When it doesn't, it's like, just a bunch of 9 jerks in black robes. What do they know? How can they? Blah, blah, blah. You know, it's the same with any law, with gun laws, but abortion laws. Let's we got to take the break again. We'll be right back. This is Patriot. We'll see you on the other side.
Attacks targeting Iraq's green zone. I'm Jane Metzler, Fox News. Rockets have hit Baghdad's green zone, where the U.S. Embassy is located, as well as Iraq's Balad Air Base. That's north of the city where U.S.-led coalition forces are stationed.
In the last hour, we're also hearing that a Hezbollah commander has said his forces are going to start targeting U.S. bases in Iraq on Sunday evening. We don't know who's responsible for the rockets in the last hour or so, but the strong suspicion is it is also Iranian-backed militias here. Luckily, no one hurt there.
Fox's Benjamin Hall in Amman, Jordan. Again, both Iraqi and U.S. officials say no casualties have been reported. Iraq's Prime Minister Abdul Mahdi, who has heavily criticized the U.S. drone strike that killed Iranian General Qassem Suleimani, attending his funeral today as demonstrators chanted "Death to America."
And tomorrow, as a result of that attack, the Iraqi parliament are going to meet to discuss the future of U.S. troops in Iraq. There are some suggestions that as a result, Parliament could expel the 5,000 plus U.S. soldiers who are here. In Iran, everyone is talking.
And with Iran vowing vengeance, the U.S. taking precautionary measures, ordering Americans to leave Iraq, stepping up all kinds of security here at home and around the world.
National security sources are saying Tehran's revenge could come in the form of cyber attacks, since the country doesn't have the ability to take on the U.S. military. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Iranians have deep cyber capability, but the U.S. is aware of the risks. Among some of the targets could be the U.S. power grid, banks, and classified government systems, and some cities across the country are changing counterterrorism deployments because of it.
Fox's Jackie Heinrich, concerned the U.S. is going to war with Iran. That demonstration in New York City, others in cities around the country. America's listening to Fox News.
Explore winter trails you never thought possible. Stand, float, walk on snow with better traction and stability than walking down the street. Modern snowshoes are the perfection of a 1,000-year-old idea. They're lightweight and versatile, easy and fun to use for all ages. If you can walk, you can snowshoe. Get the exercise you crave. Let it snow. Go explore. Start today. No lift ticket required. But first, find the right style and the right fit at Frontier Outfitters. Frontier Outfitters, for your Alaskan lifestyle.
This is Gary from Geraldo's. No matter how delicious food is, without great service, that fantastic taste, well, it would be a little less fantastic. At Geraldo's, we pride ourselves in having the most delicious old-world Italian food, but also for service that will make your visit truly memorable. From the door to the table, from the appetizer to the dessert, we strive to exceed your expectations, leaving you free to enjoy the wonderful flavors and savor your experience.
Geraldo's Italian Restaurant and Pizzeria. Say yes to garlic, say yes to Geraldo's.
Loving Companions Animal Rescue Incorporated is a nonprofit shelter and sanctuary created to save and care for unwanted abandoned animals in the state of Alaska, promoting a better life for animals and offering an alternative to killing pets. Also helping older pets that have become hard to place because of their age or disabilities. They provide a warm, comfortable home and try to place them with a new family or ensure they're able to live out their natural life. They also offer a variety of special service programs for low-income pet owners to help them keep their pets during difficult times. For more info, go to lovingcompanionsanimalrescue.org. A message from the radio station.
In times of crisis, the American Red Cross is there for the men and women of the United States Armed Forces and their families. From communicating messages during emergencies to outreach to the National Guard and Reserves to veterans assistance and military hospital visits, the Red Cross provides vital services. Support the Red Cross service to the armed forces and change a life, starting with your own. To find out how you can help, visit www.redcross.org or contact your local American Red Cross chapter. This message brought to you by the radio station.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly.
If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. You rest not your counsels or your arms, crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May a chain set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. Samuel Adams.
The time is near at hand, which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. George Washington.
And what country can preserve its liberties if its ruler is not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Thomas Jefferson.
Posterity, you will never know how much it cost the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that ever I took half the pains to preserve it. John Adams.
I sincerely believe that vacant establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling security on a large scale.
Government is instituted to protect property, this being the end of government. That alone is a just government, which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own. That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where arbitrary restrictions, exceptions, and monopolies deny the part of its citizens the free use of their own faculties. James Madison.
It would be an absurdity for jurors to be required to accept the judge's view of the law against their own opinion, judgment, and conscience. John Adams. Whenever the legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience, and are left in the common refuge which God has provided for all men against force and violence. John Locke.
It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here, idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry.
The people perish for the lack of knowledge. God.
All right. Welcome back to Patriot Cement. My name's Josh Bennett. We'll be here the next 1 hour left here in the studio. Got Mike Anderson. Good morning, Mike.
Morning.
And on the phones, we have Josh number 1 and David Giesel. Morning, guys. Yeah, I'm just not sure where to go right this minute. Oh, please, if you feel like joining us, we will take calls this hour, 907-458-8255, if you'd like to give your opinion on something like, or anything like that, whatever. So I didn't really want to end on the Virginia conversation because it's, it's broader than just that. You go for, actually, we've been talking about the Virginia situation for the last 8.5 years on the show, because it's not just a Democrat Republican thing. It's not a ban weapons thing. It's, the conversation's way bigger. We haven't finished it, and we've been talking about it for 8.5 years on this show. It's really what it is. It's so much larger than what we like to put these conversations into a box, because there are people that think that people should not own AR-15s, right?
Yeah. There
are people that think that differences of opinion on abortions. There are people, Americans, that have different opinions on what they think government should be, or if there should be government, or there's different opinions on war. Should we be involved in the Middle East? Should we be involved in any other country? So just an hour to any subject really doesn't do any of the subjects justice, except for the fact that if you look at it from a certain point of view, they're all the same subject. Mm-hmm. The discussion isn't in a box. The discussion is everything. Let's take a call because we got one now. Push the button. Hello, caller. You're welcome to Patriot Lament. Go.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was calling. I wanted your guys' advice and opinion. I had the idea of starting a mental health liberation club, but I don't know if that they would consider that a threat or,
Oh, well, you're the one that was calling the other day about mental health political party, right?
Mental health liberation club, yeah, where you just get together once a week and shoot the shit, I guess.
Oh, sorry about that. Can't say that on the radio. Goodbye. We don't have a delay, but we do have certain limitations with the FCC, and this is a family show to a certain extent. This is live radio. We are broadcasting over FCC, federally guided, regulated airwaves. So while you might listen and think, wow, you must be able to say whatever the heck you want on this show. No, there are certain words that are banned from the public air. So had to let you go on that. So we won't necessarily know where he was going with that, which might be okay.
You could say that that's what a church is.
Yeah.
It's a place where people gather to it's a place where people gather to encourage each other and pursue some common vision of the truth, which is what keeps you from thinking or becoming crazy. If you don't have a singular goal to pursue, then you become disintegrated and you become fragmented, and you have to maintain different versions of yourself. And like many psychological or mental disorders are due to that. And a church is supposed to be a gathering of people who are pursuing a singular vision of what the truth is. They're all pursuing the same thing. So you could say that party already exists.
Very nice. Mm-hmm. Let's hit back to the phones here real quick. If you want to join the conversation, maybe you're from Virginia. 907-458-8255 is, what did I say? 907-458-8255 is the number. Hello, caller. You're not there. Oh, I remember that back in the day when we used to get those. Like the whole, and we know who it was because unfortunately she passed away, but when she did, they stopped. Hello, caller. You're up.
Hello there. Am I on the air?
Yes, sir.
Okay, listen, you're talking about guns, right? And I'm believing that this is a political position that Democrats are taking because we became bad, all of us in this country pretty much, man, from the day off, and they supported the constitutional amendment there, okay? We wouldn't be where we're at today. And at the same time, I think it's just because the Republicans are pushing this agenda that the Democrats are standing up against them. I think that's what it's at a little bit. I made it simple for myself. That's what I got with it. So let me know if you feel that. Do you have any idea? Did it sound good or what? Yeah.
I can't hear you real great. I mean, you're kind of breaking up just a little bit. What was the last question?
Oh, it was. I was just trying to kind of make an statement about that. Did you get the part where I said it's like a political position on the parts of Democrats fighting the Republicans?
Okay, yep.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Sure.
And I actually believe that. I actually believe that because in the early days when we became a democracy, it was democratic rule. And at the time, they did put that in there. You know what I mean? That was really a time ago. So it's been around for a long time now. Everybody's learned to live with it. And now they're having a big stink about the whole thing, And one more thing before I let, because I know it's time and everything. There's something about the Constitution and our history that we understand. Hello? Are you still there?
Yep.
Okay. And the thing is, what you want to do, what you can't get a hold of real easy to understand what the motive in America was, go to the Weehawken Papers. It's a town out of New Jersey, which is called American Propaganda. And it's called the Weehawken Papers. You read that, man. If you don't turn into an American in 5 seconds, man, I don't know, you might not be one. You know what I mean? Because when I read it, it got me out of my chair. And I said, damn, man, I know that America is meant to be, there's a purpose to this place. Okay, there's a real America somewhere. And I think we got to get back to it. Just look inside yourself. You know what I mean? Look at things a little bit similar to other people as well. We're all the same, so there's a lot of similarities. And we just got to agree on the intellectual whatever the truth, I would imagine, would be better than anything else. The truth would be just fine, So, okay, let's hear what you got to say. If you got anything, thank you for being out there, man. Thanks. All right.
Appreciate the call. Thank you. It's a little broken up. I had a little bit of a hard time hearing some of it, but I think I got the gist of it.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is it just a political issue. I was having a conversation with somebody who's pretty close to the whole PFD discussion, shall we say, and I was listening to the two sides of that. There's more than two sides, obviously. And essentially that's just been turned into what the caller said. The caller said, maybe the gun thing has nothing to do with anything except that it's an issue that people can disagree about and therefore factionalize over. Right.
Yeah.
And so then you can ask the question, you can do the 3-year-old kid thing, right? 3-year-olds are great because they say why. And so why would you want to factionalize? Well, so you could win, right? You can't win something unless you have two sides or more sides. Okay, so what do you win? Like, what's the award? What's the prize? And it's that maybe you win some semblance of power. Well, why is that desirable? And for how long do you get it? And it's sort of, there's a funny conundrum there because the more factionalized you have to make things to achieve victory, the more fleeting the victory will be, because if you hyper factionalize and then win, it means that you've also created an arch nemesis. And so you've sown the seeds of your destruction in capturing your victory. And the political game is so focused on this minuscule time scale of the next election or the next poll or whatever, that nobody can zoom out and see that they're sowing the seeds of their own demise. But even further than that, when you factionalize the place where you live, you sow the seeds of your own personal demise and your own family's demise and your own culture's demise. And so it's the ultimate short-term gain, long-term loss that's imaginable. It's just brutal.
Mm-hmm.
There's no right side to take on most of this stuff, because both sides lead to destruction.
Yeah, and what you're saying about with the elections. I think that's what we don't even get a break yearly anymore from. There's an election every year now. So, I mean, either local, statewide, or national. And you look at presidential. I always forget when the actual election is, because I'm like, wait a minute, haven't they been campaigning for the last 3 years? What's going? You can't get away from it. I mean, it constantly has your attention. I mean, it shouldn't. Let's hope it doesn't have ours constantly, but for the general populace, it has their attention constantly. Even though majority of the people don't know who the vice president is, or they don't know anything about whatever elections, or who's running, or who's, functions of this department or this house and that house, and they don't know anything about it, but that cycle's continuing. Goes. It's a literal cycle. I mean, it never stops, and we've been told that is the most important thing in our life, is to be political and focus on that. And if it's always there, what else is there? For the normal person, that's all they can think about. And like Dave was saying, it drives me nuts.
What's fun is that, it's not fun, it's interesting, is that in theory, politics is about campaigning and then governance, but governance doesn't have the payoff. That it's not as important as campaigning anymore. And like you said, the election or the campaigning cycle has gotten so long that governance doesn't even matter. It really doesn't matter. It's more about what you say and less about what you deliver. And I just don't know what that says about a culture at any level, when they care more about just lying effectively. Because if you're saying you're going to do something and you never do it, and then you just go right into the next cycle of campaign slogans, it doesn't seem like a very stable way to live.
Yeah, I remember when Ron Paul was running the first time, and Obama was running, and Obama was just it was just a cheap line, hope and change, and Ron Paul would get up and he'd give a great philosophical speech. Well, people play to the simple terms. They play to the simple bellicose behavior of Donald Trump. It's really a dumbed down society.
And they booed him.
Yeah, they booed Ron Paul when he quoted Jesus. The conservative Christians did. So it is a cultural problem, and I personally I don't see a way out of it other than through some very difficult times, because that's what it's going to take to get them get their minds back. It's going to take generations of tough times.
Rick's harassing me again.
It just shows how effective people are effectively outsourcing autonomy to these people based on campaign slogans. Like, it's questionable to do that even when they're campaigning and actually governing and following through. Like, even then it's pretty questionable to just totally let these people have the wheel. But the fact that people are ceding their authority over their own lives and their kids' lives to people who are just doing campaign slogans, it's zero follow through. It's getting super wobbly. Like we talked about already plenty, that the gun issue has no legs. Like, there's no meat there at all. It's just rhetoric. And that's more than enough for most people. And I know people who grew up in Alaska and grew up in gun culture, and their family is in gun culture, but because they on the blue team, they are completely against it based on rhetoric. They know from experience it's not real, but people are just, it's what the boss said, they just lean out, they just turn off.
Right. Well, yeah, thinking is hard, and it's a lot more convenient just to have someone throw a phrase out at you that you don't have to think about. And I think that was the mistake that we made back during the Ron Paul times, was we thought people would turn to the thoughtful statements, would turn to the philosophy, because it to us it was good to think, but to most people, I guess it's not. I guess it's just too hard.
Well, look at what, you're just saying something about Obama, Mike, the hope and change.
Yeah.
And Josh, you were talking about, it's just constant promises, but never any action coming out of it, never follow up. It's just, okay, well, now we're into the next election cycle. But to the normal person, when Obama was talking about hope and change and never really followed up on it, but he got results from it. Didn't he get didn't he get the
Nobel Peace
award
Prize?
for Nobel Peace Prize? For what? Nothing.
Oh, we're starting some wars.
So you don't even have to do anything because there's reward for non-action. Which they did nothing too. Unfortunately, they do things.
I promise you there are people protesting Trump who didn't even know that Obama bombed Libya.
Oh, sure.
And I think people, scholars in the past would have thought, and I've thought this, that if people had just read more books, they would get it. But it's really, we had the opposite problem in the past. In the past, the problem was access to information, but now I think it's sorting information. So a regular person, you can't even blame them for being completely wrong on almost everything, because they're being lied to by people in positions of authority constantly.
Yep.
So how can a regular person who's got kids and a job sort through just genuinely professional grade lies? It's really hard. I don't think it's even possible. I don't think you can have a society that's productive where regular people have to go through layers and layers of misinformation, deliberate misinformation, not even counting just stuff that's wrong because of amateurs. And how does that society function? So, Obama said hope and change. It sounded really good. That's what they wanted. How do they know that he bombed Libya? They have to go look it up. They have to go pay attention to the news. It's a tall order for a society that's already kind of, struggling in different ways.
Well, after they've gone through 12 to 16 years of being told through a public school, this is who you trust and how they don't look at what they do, just trust them. The blind faith. This is a state. This is your God. These are your leaders. How do you expect them to understand? How do you expect them to dissect what they're being told versus what's actually done? Look at Trump with libertarians. How many libertarians have backed Trump and still thinking that he's actually playing this 4D chess game for peace, And it's like, forget what they say. It's kind of like the New England Patriots. You never watch what Bill Belichick says. You watch what he does. What politicians do is what matters. And unfortunately, they do too much. And then on the other hand, they never do what they promise. Let's kick back to the phones here real quick. And whoops. Sorry. Call back. I hung up on you. If you want to join us, it's 907-458-8255. 907-458-8255. We'll get you on the air for free. You can tell all of the world what you think about stuff and things. Okay, they're back. Hello, caller. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead.
All right. It seems like everyone's teaching all the kids to seek a master, somebody to tell me what to do, when to do, and how to do. And if we don't give them a chance to think about anything, how to do, what to do, when to do, and have their own experience, all they are is obedient slaves. And it seems to me that everybody's looking for a master. Master, please tell me what to do, master. Anyway, that's what I was looking at. I'm really glad that the guy brought up the idea that you're allowed this. Who's the person who allows or who doesn't allow? And wouldn't that be each person individually?
Well, we'd like to think so.
And the Constitution is the law for the civil servants. They're not for the people. And they're just not following their own laws and oath of office.
Very good point.
Anyways, they're pretty much trying to take over the country, and it's been happening for a while. We've been invaded. Hopefully people pay attention and and be individual thinkers rather than slaves who follow their massa. All right. Thank you very much. Try not to be anybody's boss. It's not your place. Thanks.
Thanks, Cecily. Appreciate it.
That's the conundrum for gun control advocates too, is how do you enforce gun control?
With war. War against the people themselves.
Yeah, you get armed. You get armed guys to enforce it. Well,
yeah, you can't.
How does that work?
Yeah, you can't be anti-war and anti-gun at the same time. It's a philosophical contradiction, because you'd have to use the war of the state to enforce the anti-gun measures.
Mm-hmm. I watched this video with a guy named Cam Edwards, he's in Virginia, but he's also a general kind of gun podcast guy, and he had on some lawyer who said that his legal team tried to estimate the cost of actually incarcerating a pretty conservative fraction of what he estimated. This many people in Virginia, this many people are gun owners, this many people won't comply, and it was all very conservative and probably lower than you would guess. And the cost per county was astronomical. Even just housing these people for a day, like arresting them, it's not even possible. Like, if people don't comply, like the scale of the cost, he was talking hundreds of millions of dollars, I think, for an individual county to arrest all the offenders, not even counting the violence that might go with that. And he said it's not even feasible. He can't even imagine doing it. So it's a joke.
Right. Mm-hmm. I thought Cecily, I liked one. Well, it's like when she calls, but one of the things she said there was pretty important, and because you've seen this whole thing about Constitution being the law of the land and the rule of, and we're all bound by the Constitution and yippity yappity, and what she said is absolutely true. The Constitution is outside of the Spooner, is no effect to regular people. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with you or David, the other Josh. It was specifically meant and intended for the federal government and the people in the federal government. It had nothing to do with how the people are going to be regulated. It had nothing to do with how people are supposed to act, blah, blah, blah. Supposedly. We all know it's all bull crap and garbage anyways, but it's like, politicians, you're the ones that are supposedly bound by it. Don't try to put it on us, because I haven't taken an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, and I never will. They did. So they're the ones that are supposed to follow it.
Yeah. Well, I did see in one article that his regarding how to enforce the gun confiscation, it seemed that the only power he really had was withholding funds from the state, from counties, which are really just federal funds that he gets and redistributes, right? So,
well, I thought that was great, because what the governor said was, legislators will withhold funds from your attorney general or your local prosecutors, and you won't be able to prosecute people. It's like, right on. Like this. That's more awesome. And more. Another unintended consequences.
Makes you wonder.
Consequence for freedom.
How are they going to prosecute the people that disobey the gun law? He's kind of shooting himself in the foot there.
Well, it's just they're so stupid. They're so stupid.
I have a question.
They're so stupid.
Yeah. I have a question for Josh. One on that, which is with the Virginia governor. Do you think he's actually pursuing this as a policy, or do you think he is being used as do you think it's being used as a litmus test to take the temperature of the public and see what's tolerable in 2020?
That's a super good question. I largely subscribe that a lot of political forces are directed at a pretty high level. So I feel like there's got to be a reason to this, but I actually haven't figured out what it could be, because, as I mentioned before, the Supreme Court is not going to rule in their favor. He has no actual ability to execute anything he's going for. Like we talked, maybe he didn't predict the county rebellion, but I just can't imagine that they were that dumb. I just can't imagine they thought they would have like a smooth ride at this. But I think it might. I'm not sure. I think the best I've come up with is that this is going to complicate Trump's time. Kind of like the war. This is an election year, so it's pretty safe to assume that everything's related to the election. On the other hand, a character we haven't mentioned so far is Michael Bloomberg, and he's the one who funded Virginia's bill and also Virginia's big push, and also the one in Washington where I'm at. Every town is what it's called, I think. Yeah, every town for gun safety.
Oh, right. Yep.
And they dump hundreds of millions into this. And it's really fun hearing people talk about the gun lobby, which really doesn't exist. And the NRA is pretty ineffective right now, and also way, way poorer than every town. But so it's either political related to the election, or it's just Michael Bloomberg pushing gun safety, or gun safety in air quotes, of course. He's really, really stuck on that thing. But I feel like there's a lot going on here with this. This can't be as ham-handed as it is. Because if you look at it like a Democrat would, and someone who stops for a second and looks at the numbers, they'd go, okay, well, how is he going to enforce this? Is he going to cause a civil war? What's going to happen? Like, I don't see how he gets from A to B on this at all. So there's got to be something there. Or maybe Northern is as dumb as everyone says. That's the alternative.
Well, I see there's plenty of times where I think that they're flat dumb. I mean, I know it's hard for me to believe sometimes that they could be this and not expect pushback and stuff. But I think that when you have power, that it mentally affects your brain to thinking that you actually have power. And when you have, like, say 1 million people vote for you, it goes to your head where you think, wow, I'm some kind of something. Mm-hmm. I'm a little god. When I speak, all these people over here do what I say. When I say, I want this much of your wealth, people give it to me voluntarily. Mm-hmm. I think it actually goes to their head a little bit to where they do think when even something like this, that they can get away with it and they don't look at it as getting away with it. They look at it. I mean, you read some of the comments that some of the House members there, Josh, in Virginia, were so arrogant because they're just like, they could not believe that anyone was pushing back at all because we're going to pass a law. What do you mean you're not going to obey it? It's us passing a law. You have to do what we say. We won. And I saw that in a couple of comments too, is we won the election. Mm-hmm. It's our turn. We get to set the rules. And I think that some of them are a little more hideous than others, but I think some of them really just have a mental block. Once they get power, it consumes them, and they think, yeah, whatever I say, I'm the new god in town. Despite, when the state makes a law, the blah, 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 even though their supreme law is supposed to be their constitution that guarantees the right for them to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. It's so dumb. It's so simple. Shall not be infringed. So that means any gun law, and of course you're going to get people to freak out and say, what, any gun law? We have to have common sense gun legislation. What does that mean? No, you don't. You're not allowed to. And that's why I can't stand the NRA, because they agree, well, yeah, we should have some common sense gun laws, yada, yada, yada. They were the first turncoats in the whole gun debate in the first place.
Well, there's only one common sense gun law that's out there: shall not be infringed.
Right. And it's not even a law. Technically, it's just an affirmation of natural law. You have the right to protect yourself.
But it's so important that it's in multiple state constitutions, not just the U.S. Constitution, but the state constitutions.
Did you know Alaska is a Second Amendment sanctuary state?
Is it official? I mean,
official
by resolution or
no, by law.
Oh,
I'm gonna look that. You guys talk. I'll look.
But it's like you mentioned. I think that maybe Northam is dumb enough to just let it go to his head. And this, like I said earlier, this issue is a free issue for Democrats. Like, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to solve a problem. You don't have to actually like have a plan and get experts and make people's lives better. You don't have to do anything like that. You just say this is no longer allowed, and you get political points for it. So for them, it's like a very irresistible issue. But I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, especially when I don't want to, but I feel like I should, just because, they're calling up the National Guard, like, they're doing some really serious stuff, and I want to feel like there's someone in the room going, hey guys, like, how are we going to actually execute this? How is this actually going to work? But I'm just not seeing that evidence, especially with people in the National Guard kind of balking at the issue, and then sheriffs and 90% of their state by geography pushing back. I want to feel like someone on their side saw it, because if not, that just means they're totally insane, and that's terrifying. But I don't think Bloomberg is insane in the sense that he's effective at a large scale. I do think his views on guns are a joke, and I think most of his political views are a joke. He's not an intelligent man in politics. He was recently saying that you have to tax poor people for their own benefit to stop them from doing stuff on camera. That's how all sin taxes work. But he was casually saying it, so he's not aware of what the little people think. But
right. Yeah, and he points out that they are little people because they don't have the ability to control themselves, right?
Yeah, he's a hideous human being. Like, he really is. And he's behind this, so I want to kind of believe there's a worse motive than just this is his hobby.
Mm-hmm.
But at every step of what they're doing, it doesn't make sense, because they will lose in court at the state level or at the federal level. They will not be able to execute this on any level. At best, they cause a civil war or a small incident or something like that, and then they lose the election next year. I can't see how I don't know. I want to find like there's some kind of game plan, but I'm just not seeing it, honestly.
Well, didn't the U.S. A few years ago sign into the UN gun ban treaty?
I heard that was a thing. I don't know if we actually did.
Okay.
I don't see that. Especially I don't know how that would work, especially with the Heller and the two big Supreme Court cases that are pro-gun that happened a while back. I think that happened more recently, but they wouldn't work. They wouldn't fit with that at all.
No, it doesn't anyways, because technically, I've read stuff and heard stuff people too where they're saying, well, treaties trump all law, blah, blah, blah.
No, they don't.
And they don't, because only treaties in pursuance thereof, they have to be in pursuance of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And I know this might sound funny from a bunch of anarchists that don't believe in the Constitution, but at the same time, I love me some Constitution. If I can use it against the federal government anytime, any place, I'll gladly use it. Yeah. And I'm not against a quote unquote Constitution on its face, just the you said the word, I'm against that. That doesn't have anything to do with it. In pursuance thereof, it has to be in pursuance. It's just like, I was just looking this up. Alaska is a Second Amendment sanctuary state, passed in 2016. And of course, the state attorney for the state said, well, that doesn't cut the mustard, because the United States Constitution says that federal law is the supreme law of the land. It doesn't actually, but what it does say is that any laws that are passed in the federal government has to be in pursuance of the Constitution. So if they pass a law that isn't in pursuance thereof, it's not a law. Mm-hmm. It's not the supreme law of the land. And if we want to argue that point, which I never understand why no one ever does when they're arguing with these idiot attorneys. Have you ever heard of the Virginia resolutions and the Kentucky resolutions?
Yeah.
The guy that wrote the Constitution and wrote the Bill of Rights, James Madison, wrote the Virginia resolution saying, hello, when you pass a law that is not in pursuance of the federal Constitution, it's not a law. And his whole deal, the whole thing with the Virginia resolutions were when John Adams, when they passed the Alien Seditions Act back when he got to be president, which basically suspended the First Amendment. You couldn't say anything bad against the federal government or his administration in particular, or they put you in jail, and they locked up a lot of people. And Madison's whole thing was, oh yeah, you can't do that. You can't suspend the Constitution. And Adams' administration's argument was, well, we're the federal government. We're the supreme law of the land. And he said, bull crap. I wrote the stupid thing. That's not what it meant. In pursuance of the Constitution, if you're outside the bounds, then it's not a law. And those resolutions passed in Kentucky and Virginia, and it never ended up having to become anything. But I mean, Josh, you were talking a little bit earlier about, intent. That is the intent. Mm-hmm. If it's outside the intent, the state legislators, the sheriffs, the police officers, normal citizens, whatever, you're not bound by anything. Just because the Supreme Court at one point said, well, the United States, you know what, that freaking reminds me of something. I'll tell you what the United States Supreme Court said. One of the most important decisions ever that the Supreme Court made happened back yonder, right after the Constitution, the federal government was created and everything. And the case was Georgia versus... what was it? Cotton picker. Georgia versus Chisholm. That's what it was. So Chisholm took the state of Georgia to court, and Georgia said, you can't because we're a state. You're an individual. Georgia's a sovereign state. Mm-hmm. And, according to old common law, a serf couldn't take a sovereign to court. He didn't have standing, right? You have to have equal standing to take someone to court. So this was the first test on what is legitimacy of sovereignty. Who has sovereignty in our new form of government? And I'm just going to read. Oh, we got time. I'll plow through these real quick. First of all, fantastic article someone wrote here. The word sovereign is a chief ruler with supreme power, one possessing sovereignty. Also applied to a king or other magistrate with limited powers. And this is from, I guess they didn't put it in the United States, sovereignty resides in the body of the people. 10th Amendment, powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So back to this decision with Georgia versus Chisholm. Mm-hmm. James Wilson, Supreme Court Justice and signer of both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, did some stuff that I would argue with, but here was... These next things I'm going to read were just part of the decisions and what they wrote. To the Constitution of the United States, the term sovereign is totally unknown. Mm-hmm. There is but one place where it could have been used with propriety. But even in that place, it would not perhaps have comported to the delicacy of those who ordained and established the Constitution. They might have announced themselves sovereign people of the United States, but serenely conscious of the fact, they avoided the ostentatiousness of the Declaration. The founders knew that the people were the sovereigns. Another thing, Wilson says, as a judge of this court, I know and can decide upon the knowledge that the citizens of Georgia, when they acted upon the large scale of the Union as part of the, quote, people of the United States, did not surrender the supreme or sovereign power to that state. But as in the purpose of the Union, they retained it to themselves. Concerning the prerogative of kings and concerning the sovereignty of states, much has been said and much has been written, but little has been said and written concerning the subject much more dignified and much more important, the majesty of the people. The mode of expression, which I would substitute in the place of that generally used, is not only politically, but also, for between true liberty and true taste there is a close alliance, classically more correct. At the Revolution, this is John Jay, who was Chief Justice, the sovereignty devolved on the people. Declaration of Independence kicked off the king. They are truly the sovereigns of the country, but they are sovereigns without subjects and have none to govern but themselves. The citizens of America are equal as fellow citizens and as joint tenants of the sovereignty. For the difference existing between feudal sovereignties and governments founded on compacts, it necessarily follows that the respective prerogative must differ. Sovereignty is the right to govern. A nation or state sovereign is a person or persons in whom they reside. In Europe, sovereignty is generally ascribed to the prince. Here, it rests with the people. There, the sovereignty actually administers the government. Here, never in a single instance. Our governors are agents of the people, and at most stand in the same relation to their sovereign in which regents in Europe stand to their sovereigns. Their princes have personal powers, dignities, and preeminences. Our rulers have none but as official, nor do they partake in a sovereignty otherwise, or in any other capacity except as a private citizen. We are the sovereign in the land. And I love the part where it says, with none to govern but themselves. That was one of the very first, in fact, it might have been the first. No, it was one of the very first times that the Supreme Court actually met as a body and heard a case. Now, good old government doing what they will do, because this firmly set the original intent. The people are the sovereigns of this nation. That's and along came the 11th Amendment saying, no, we can't have any of that nonsense.
That decision was, that's probably the best description of anarchism I've ever heard. And that's what it was meant to be, was an anarchist government.
None to rule but
not a state.
Wasn't supposed to be. That's why there are so many that were against the forming of the federal government, because they knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I want to throw that in there. There's all these people that are complaining about sheriffs and, well, you have to do, and you don't have, in life, you really don't have to do anything.
No.
And no one can force you to do anything. They can harm you, waterboard you, kill you, take your limbs off. But even then, they cannot force you to do something. We always should remember that.
And that's a strong moral case, but even practically in this case, there's not enough cops in the world to do a gun seizure in this country. And as we mentioned earlier, that it's not even possible to apply this law in any way, even if they could arrest everyone who wouldn't comply. Which is why I've always liked the whole buy your way out of the problem, which Americans probably are already way past, honestly. I guess the most recent numbers that came out in November said there's like 460 million weapons in America, firearms, which is way more than the old estimates. So like, they can't do it.
It's double the old estimate.
Yeah. The real issue is what they're going to do is they're going to try and kill gun culture. They have time on their side. So what they're going to do is, like Obama used the EPA against Obama used the EPA against gun ranges and all that stuff. And now, most recently, in that omnibus bill that passed a while back, they snuck in the fact that the CDC is now allowed to study gun control again, which seems kind of benign on the surface, but the last time the CDC was able to study gun violence, they ended up kind of pre-red flagging people, like medical red flags. And that's why they lost their right to do it. They got taken away from them. And it sounds weird on the surface, but they actually, for whatever reason, the CDC is very, very, very anti-gun in a medical way. And I skimmed the paper last night of a big study on it, and it found only bias against gun owners in the CDC studies. So they're going to find ways to do it. Like I said, they didn't win in Australia and New Zealand in the sense they didn't get 100% of guns or even a majority of them back, but they did win in 20 years. So it's really about chipping it away and making your kids forget about this kind of stuff and forgetting their sovereigns in this way. So it's much sneakier than it could be. So
it'll take a little longer with guns, I think, because it's so ingrained until I mean, you'd have to have movies quit having guns, because even in movies, good guys have guns, and they're not always cops. You know, and you can always pull up the old Cowboy Channel and watch, which was nonsense, but everyone was carrying a gun and shooting up everything. So the gun culture is going to it's a long road, but I think they have the patience, because they don't have, it's like you said, it costs them nothing to wait. It costs them nothing to bring the subject up. So it's not, you know, and then even with people that, I don't know, one of the arguments always is, oh, you think you're going to take on the U.S. military with an AR-15? Well, no, but 100 million people could. And which you don't want to take on the military anyways. And how many military people would even do it?
Right.
Yeah.
And Afghanistan is a pretty good case in point in taking on the United States military, and they're still rolling over there. They don't have any weapons. They got a bunch of junky AK-47s. They're not rolling in tanks. They don't got air superiority. They don't got anything. The United States has everything that says they should win every single war they fight. The whole nation of Iran spends $5 billion a year on their military. That's 6 days worth of the United States military. 6 freaking days. Afghanistan is probably 30 seconds. So comparatively, it should have been a cakewalk, and they couldn't do it. You know, it's something you don't actually ever want to happen, but when their arms are taken away, there is a real thing with a populace having weapons and keeping their government in check, even if they never use them. It is real. Otherwise, the government would never want to take them. If they didn't fear that, they would never be trying to take them away.
And right now, what they have to keep the states in line is is federal funds.
Federal funds,
especially Alaska.
Yeah.
Once the dollar is no longer the reserve currency, which probably won't be all that long from now, they can't rely on that so much. And maybe we'll see that breakdown back into the Bedouin mindset.
Mm-hmm. And
that'll be a good thing.
Yeah, and that kind of, I think that the subtle issue they've accidentally introduced is the 10th Amendment nullification, like you mentioned. Like, that's a way more insidious idea from the perspective of DC types. Because, I mean, I remember seeing, what was his name? Michael Bolden, 2011, up in Fairbanks. And back then, I was a poli-sci major at UAF, and talking about the 10th Amendment made you a racist. Like, that's what people actually said, like talking about states' rights and all that kind of stuff. Nullification got you in trouble. And now we've got sanctuary cities in Virginia and Washington, of course, and then cannabis states are doing nullification. So nullification is like a real thing in practice at a large scale, and it's out of the bag. So it's going to be really hard to make the case that Virginia can't do these nullification when everyone else is doing it in different ways. So that brings us way closer to Bedouin stuff than anything else.
Yeah, we really are seeing the beginning of the breakup of the federal mafia, the federal monster, I think. And with the liquidity crisis coming and all that, the money's just not going to be available to do what they've been doing, and with the funding not available, then maybe we'll finally see a retrace to how history should be playing out.
Well, let's hope the dollar collapses before we go to war with Iran.
Well, I think the dollar is going to be displaced because of the liquidity crisis. It's going to be hoarded, and so people around the world are going to be demanding a new reserve currency because they can't get a hold of anything to trade with, and that will displace the dollar, and it'll be out of Americans' control at that point.
My guns. Did you say 400 million? Because I remember the last thing I saw, and it was old, was like 200. And I figured, man, it stayed at 200 million for a long time.
Yeah.
Can you imagine 450 million guns? That's ridiculous.
I've seen something like 500 million, 550 recently.
I mean, I'm waiting.
It was a big number. They updated the number just recently, like in November, and it was like 150 million higher than the old one.
Wow.
So now it's officially there are more guns than people. When it used to be there's like one gun and change per person, now it's quite a bit more than that.
Well, yeah, not every household has a gun in it, so it's concentrated within some households.
Yeah, this is. Yeah, the old number was 270 million. Now I think it's up to 450. Is what I'm seeing. But
Mike,
that's already a completely. You can't seize that many guns. It's not possible. No,
it's foolish. I wanted to ask you, Josh, didn't Connecticut pass a black gun ban a few years ago, and didn't they just kind of repeal it because no one turned in their guns? It was after the school shooting there. Maybe they didn't repeal it, but okay.
And New York did too in some fashion. Like, the truth is that it's really hard to call it doing a quote unquote assault weapons ban because it's not a real thing. It's just a cosmetic thing. A lot of them allow for AR-15s to be banned, but not Ruger Mini 14s. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
So it's really hard to say, but they're not really. They have no teeth, and there's no enforcement. So yeah, they're not going anywhere. The reason why people are getting nervous about the Virginia law more than the other laws is it requires a full seizure, and it accelerated really quick. Instead of just being kind of something people ignored, it immediately got accelerated to National Guard, which immediately got people riled up. You know what I mean? So what's interesting about the Virginia thing is that people get accelerated really fast. Washington has got the same laws on the books. It's going to be in session in January, and no one cares. I mean, the gun crowd cares, but people don't really care. But Virginia got accelerated really fast, probably because Northam is a moron. But
well, I saw something recently. This guy, he was, those gun buyback programs that they do in some places. He was making up junk guns, taking them in, getting the money, and then buying real ones.
Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome. More people should do that.
Pretty sweet, actually.
So yeah, I mean, people are, and when they have magazine bans, they can't even collect the magazines. No one turns them in.
Yeah, that's all.
So, yeah.
Well, guys, we're at the end of the show. Josh, you need to come back and join us more often. This is a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
It was great. Dave, thanks for running the show on the YouTube for us today, man. You want to close it out?
No problem. I wanted to close it out by mentioning that Patriot Lament may be broadcasting from Mexico next month.
Whoop, whoop.
Yep, we are looking at going down to Jeff Berwick's and Acapulco, and so stay tuned for that.
Yes.
That'll be awesome.
Oh, snap. All right, folks. Thanks for joining us, Mike, Dave, and Josh, number one. Love you guys. We'll see you next week. Stay safe. Hopefully we'll be here and we'll still be at peace.
And prevent a heart attack. Here's your host,
See ya.
Dr. Scott Looper, your guide to better health.